This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto was captured by Tobi after pain attack. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The whole Leaf Village waited for their hero to come back. By himself, the lone boy had vanquished the godlike creature, Pain. One of the most formidable shinobi in Konoha, the fabled Sannin Jiraiya, had been killed by Pain. When Pain was destroying Konoha's army and leveling the entire village with a single jutsu, it should have been impossible to defeat him. Their hopes of victory were dashed. However, their hopes were rekindled when Naruto returned and used a single blow to defeat one of the Pains. When they saw the almost formed Kyuubi in a massive meteor in the sky, they began to have second thoughts. They gave a brief cheer upon learning that he had vanquished Pain. However, they were burdened by the anguish of losing so many of their loved ones. Given their weakness and the large number of dead, another village would undoubtedly exploit them and destroy them. When the dead came back to life, their hopes were completely restored. Katsuyu's explanation of Naruto's deed had cleared up their confusion. They roared with joy at the return of their beloved people. It was all because of the demon boy they used to despise. At least the majority of them. They waited patiently now, awaiting the return of their hero, to make a graceful return from outside the forest. A sequence of explosions could be heard in the distance, so it didn't happen. There was an explosion in the far hill, and almost the whole village watched. Shikaku and Inoichi's remark swiftly went viral among the sizable crowd. The words, "That's where Naruto went in alone," echoed through the audience. Ninja responded swiftly, running in the direction of the observed explosion. Regardless of their ability to assist, the villagers rushed forward. Everyone was concerned about the unexpected explosion that was heard near the location where their hero used to be. Hinata ran with the force, exhausted and with her injury just healed. Something horrible had happened to him, and she couldn't shake the feeling. As her fears increased, she couldn't help but be in awe of what she was seeing. Even civilians had fled farther back, but almost all of Konoha's ninja forces were trying to get to him and assist him. They forced themselves to run along even though almost everyone was worn out. I hoped he was all right. In the midst of the smoldering ruins, Kakashi stood by himself. Several trees in the area were on fire as a result of the fire jutsu that lit numerous small fires throughout the clearing. Like a Rasen shuriken blast, a huge crater was pressed into the earth. What took place here? He had just left the village after coming to pick up his student when the explosion happened. Concerned for his student, he ran here despite being far too weak to engage in a real fight. In an attempt to find his student, he looked everywhere. He discovered only a torn Akatsuki cloak. He bit his thumb and performed the required hand signals, gathering what little chakra he still had. He finished it and slammed his hand down. Summoning jutsu. A pack of ninja dogs appeared as the smoke cloud cleared. "Kakashi?" asked Pakun. They were wondering why he was present when they learned of their summoners passing just a short while ago. Desperately, Kakashi said, "Now's not the time. I need you to find Naruto as quickly as you can. Pakun, come with me." The nindogs heard his tone and immediately dispersed, already recognizing his scent. Pakun was shown the fragment of the Akatsuki's robe by Kakashi. Pakun took a small whiff and asked, "Does it smell familiar?" "It smells like that man with the orange mask," he was saying. Kakashi clenched his fist in anger and uttered, "That's bad. Really bad. If he got Naruto, he's already long gone." His breathing became labored. "Damn it!" exclaimed Kakashi. He immediately regained self-control after his outburst, unable to allow his feelings to rule him. There was still a chance that he might be saved if someone else had abducted him. His doubts persisted, though. How could they locate him? He heard multiple shinobi arrive, with more coming every other second. "I could only hope it's not that man," he said. As Sakura shouted, "Kakashi! Sensei! You need to hear this," the pink-haired Kunoichi ran toward him in the crater. There was a tiny slug on her shoulder. "Lady Katsuyu, please explain quickly." Ninjas hurried to surround the two surviving members of Team 7, wondering what had happened to Naruto Uzumaki. As she didn't finish it, Kakashi closed his eye in defeat and said, "Of course, after talking, Naruto was attacked by man with an orange mask. I'm not sure what exactly happened, as my clone was quickly killed in the beginning of the fight, but being here. We need to locate him immediately," Kiba yelled. Neji shouted, "We shouldn't have let him go alone." Everyone drew conclusions too fast. When Hinata heard what they were thinking, she was overcome with fear and said, "No, is he?" She began to cry, her heart pounding with agony. She fell to her knees on the floor as her breathing became rapid. 10.10 tried to console her by leaning over her. Kakashi called out to the ninja, "Calm down, everyone. This is no time to panic. Soon after, more ninja had shown up, curious about what had happened. They gathered around Kakashi Hitaki, a well-known ninja in the village, after he revealed that Naruto was their target and that he was still alive because he had the Kyuubi. With hope, Hinata glanced up at the news that she needed to save him, regardless of the price. Sakura said, "What should we do?" She was worried because she knew they didn't have much time. Kakashi said, "Tell me, Sakura, who's all coming here." He spoke with absolute authority. Protecting the villagers from a dangerous man was just as important to them as finding Naruto. Quickly, she stated, nearly the entire village, ninja and civilians. He yelled, "Damn it! Shikaku!" and materialized in front of him, anticipating his next move. "We need to quickly gather any able-bodied sensory-type ninja, to search around the area. They still might be around," he explained. And Shikaku nodded in agreement because he shared his thoughts. "Get into squads of 6 or more. We also need to get the civilians back into the village. It's not safe for them here," he said. Eager to save their hero, Shikaku and Kakashi both gave orders to the other ninja, who promptly obeyed. Ninja who were more fit and unhurt soon formed groups and scattered throughout the areas. To help the civilians return to the village, other, more wounded ninja remained. The groups were breaking up fast. The ninja were rapidly leaving the battlefield. Hinata approached a group of Shino, Sakura, Kiba, and Team Guy, preparing to leave. When she attempted to join them, Sakura yelled, "Hinata, I can't let you go." She argued that she had every right to save the boy she loved. Why not?" she asked. She interrupted just as she was about to argue further. "You're still injured, you can't risk reopening your wound," she said. "She's right, Hinata. Sama, you must rest, you can't help Naruto in your current state." Neji got involved. Although Hinata was offended by what they had said, she was unable to deny its veracity. Hinata gave herself a hug while lowering her head in shame and dismay at her incapacity to assist a loved one. Their recommendations made her whimper. "I'm too weak." Doubt began to creep in. Were they able to locate him? If he was never going to return, she had no idea what she would do. Sakura tried to calm her when she felt a hand on her shoulder and said, "Hinata." They didn't need to witness her tears, so she didn't look up at them. She concluded, "Don't worry about it, we'll find Naruto." She could still see her blatantly fake smile through her bangs, and Hinata didn't trust her because she could hear the doubt in her voice. Sakura had a horrible habit of lying. Hinata stood desolately alone in the clearing as Sakura made her way back to her group. Her nails dug into her palms and drew blood as she clenched her fists in silent pain. Her pale lavender eyes began to well up with more tears. She collapsed to her knees and let her cries be heard as her grief grew. She exclaimed, "NN Naruto. I'm S. Ori I couldn't H. Help." As the nindogs sped past her, Konan positioned herself far from the person she knew to be Kakashi Hitaki. She covered her jutsu in pheromones. Since nindogs mostly used their scent to track and alert, she could only easily fool Quick's uncalculating looks. However, if someone had a dojutsu or paid close enough attention, she would be identified. All she could do was hope for good fortune. She saw many Konoha ninja rush to the location of the one-eyed Jonin after hearing a lot of shouting. She appeared to be lucky as many ninja carrying Byakugan went by her. She reasoned that the residue chakra must be impairing their vision. She appeared to be lucky. She only survived because of Naruto, and he was taken prisoner because of her. "I have to save him." She was adamant that he was the realization of Yahiko and Nagato's dreams, and that he needed to live in order to realize them. In the final moments of his life, Nagato trusted Naruto to fulfill his promise. Because she also believed in him, she had to save him. She couldn't assist him if she were taken prisoner by the Konoha shinobi. Naruto would die as a result of questioning her and removing the Kyuubi from him. She cautiously spied to find a path free of dojutsu practitioners as she heard commands being shouted. She wasn't a sensory-type ninja even back then, and she didn't think she could get away with all the ninjas scurrying around in her weak state. As she waited, more shinobi scattered, and she considered the various locations where the Kyuubi would be extracted. To visit one of the hideouts, she had to take a chance. Only a single indigo-colored kunoichi was crying when she looked around. The words, "NN Naruto. I'm S. Ori I couldn't H. Help," were heard by Konan. Is she in love with him? She recalled Nagato making a remark about a girl interfering and letting loose the Kyuubi. "When my parents were killed, it was exactly like this. Love breeds sacrifice." Konan made the risky decision after realizing she had the Byakugan. She would be sure they could make their getaway if she could persuade the girl to accompany her. She slipped down from the trees, deactivated her jutsu, and walked stealthily over to the distraught girl. She needed to win, and if she convinced the girl, she would have a much better chance. Konan halted a few paces behind her, and she had stopped crying. She questioned the girl. Do you want to save Naruto-san? She didn't seem to acknowledge her and didn't respond. She paid attention to what she said next. Hinata stopped crying and knelt down. She was so helpless. From behind her, she heard soft footsteps. In her mourning, she had disregarded a feminine voice that had called out to her. With a start, Hinata jerked up and turned, saying, I know where he is. She was shocked to see a kunoichi with indigo hair who was about Naruto's height and had a light blue origami flower in her hair. Her eyes were amber with lavender eyeshadow. What shocked her the most was the torn black cloak with the red cloud design, which indicated her affiliation with the Akatsuki. She was wearing dark blue tights. The group that had taken Naruto hostage. Hinata prepared herself for the gentle fist pose. She told Hinata, I need your help to rescue Naruto-san. What? She exclaimed. She didn't understand why she needed assistance because she was one of them. The two kunoichi with blue hair gazed at one another. Calculating, both eyes searched for whatever they were looking for. One for dishonesty, one for a potential ally. Calmly, she explained, Naruto-san and I were attacked by another individual that was part of the Akatsuki. With the intention of finding more information and uncovering any lies, Hinata turned on her Byakugan. Hinata had a lot of questions and questioned why this person would speak to her when she could have killed her with ease. To save Naruto-kun. Why the abrupt shift? She asked firmly, why do you want to rescue Naruto-kun? With all of her thoughts focused on him and no stuttering, she had to save him. She explained, I want to save him. He is the one who can bring peace to this world. Hinata observed her composure and serious demeanor, noting that she saw no signs of dishonesty in her Byakugan. I believe he is the only one who can, but I need your help to save him, she said. Hinata was determined to save him and would stop at nothing to do so. Her determination was bolstered by his radiant smile. She witnessed the masked person's abilities. Hinata could only assume he could travel great distances because he had vanished without a trace. He would never be located by the tracking teams. She inquired, do you know where Naruto-kun is? She was desperate to save him, and Konan could see it in her eyes. She clarified, I might. But we have to leave immediately and it's just the two of us. Hinata nodded without hesitation. We leave now. Come, she said to her as she made her way to a place she saw to be devoid of Byakugan users. She said, can you run? Noticing that her jacket was bloody and had a hole in it, she mentioned that it was healed with medical ninjutsu after it was struck by one of the pain's rods, which largely supported her theories. Hi, I'll keep for up now. Hinata felt a little more energized now that she had a genuine chance to save him. Not some illusory optimism. After nodding, the woman in the robe began to run through the forest. Hinata trailed behind and soon began running alongside him. When they had settled into a tempo that was both comfortable and exciting for them, Konan raised his voice. Because of the few remaining members of Akatsuki, I determined that we have about 6 days to rescue Naruto-san before they extract the Kyuubi that he holds within him. We can get to the location in 3 days with non-stop running. Konan told her. She didn't think they would arrive in 3 days. Both of them were worn out from today, and they would need at least a full day's rest. Hinata declared, Hi, I'll take even the smallest chance to save him. Then Konan corrected, we'll take it. However, he nodded in agreement. Hinata replied, oh. Of course. Hinata realized after a short while that she didn't know her name. What is your name? She asked. Konan nodded and said, my name is Hinata. They might as well know one another's names if they were going to be together for a few days. If you don't mind me asking Konan-san, why aren't we bringing anyone else along? Replied Hinata. Konan turned to face the younger kunoichi who was running next to her. She was genuinely interested in the reason behind her apparent trust. Any larger would significantly lower our infiltration capability, and I already took a large risk trusting you since I might have been captured, she said. She noticed the teenager nod in comprehension. She went on, unless you know of anyone else. Hinata's response was, no, there's no one else. She wondered if anyone else would concur. She questioned whether Sakura would have, but she was with a group of people who would surely object and prevent them. Because they wouldn't trust her, anyone else would have turned her in, which would have killed Naruto. The thought made her swallow the lump. Stealing her resolve, she said, we'll save him. She questioned, why would you trust M.Me? It took Konan a moment to respond. Hinata looked slightly away from her, a little uneasy that she had discovered her feelings for him so quickly. You tried to save him, and because you love him, do you not? She asked. Still, she responded. She said, Hi. I do. They kept moving forward, dodging other ninja with Hinata's Byakugan. Konan calmly answered, then that is the reason. Naruto thought he was blinded by the light when he saw whiteness, but when he blinked, he saw nothing at all. He was terrified even though he saw nothing to be afraid of. To check if he was still there, he glanced down at his hands. His breathing became more labored, and his hands began to shake violently. Where had he gone? What brought him here? Panic set in, and he wanted to scream. However, since he could no longer see anyone, he knew that no one would be able to respond to him. He wanted to get away from this emptiness by running. With the exception of his legs, which refused to carry him forward. Was he moving? At least that's what he believed. Or was he motionless? Naruto was thus compelled to gaze into the limitless white chasm. To what extent could he see? Did it come to an end? Giving up was the only thing Naruto could hope for. All he could do was hope that someone would come to his aid and relieve his loneliness, but he had his doubts. The day had almost come to an end since Naruto vanished, and Kakashi stood atop the Hokage monument. Hours ago, the search for any signs of him in the village was cancelled. He peered down at the village, which had already been rebuilt. Thanks to Yamato, 24 buildings stood tall and proud. Dozens more were being worked on by hundreds of workers. After taking the Hite.8 out of his left eye, Kakashi used his Sharingan eye to focus on the somber stances of many villagers and the tense movements of ninja. The village's condition was not good. There was a gloomy atmosphere in the village because Tsunade was in a coma and their hero was gone. Minato. Sensei, I failed you. He gathered the papers he had with him and immediately jolted himself out of his gloomy state by saying, not yet, there's still a chance. He ignored how slim that chance was and hurried to the town site. He was on his way to his destination, which was outside the reconstruction's epicenter. Shinobi had pitched their tents all around. There were many shinobi gathered inside the large tent where he was gathered. Squad leaders and those who knew Naruto well were among those present. Everyone was eager to go out and save him and was waiting tensely for any new information about him. There was a big round table in the middle, with many captains seated around it and other chunin seated nearby or far away. Kakashi. Guy called solemnly. He was the first to notice him, facing the entrance. He stopped talking about youth because he was now missing two of the pupils. Everyone in the tent turned to stare, and as silence fell over the room, nobody made any remarks about his early arrival. Is this everyone? Kakashi asked loudly, and his authoritative voice created a tense atmosphere in the tent. To be sure, everyone looked around. Tenten went on, we're missing Hinata.san. She and her teammates stood behind Guy. There's no way she would miss this, Kiba, frustrated, screamed. He thought she would be here, but he had been searching everywhere. Everyone had begun making assumptions. In exasperation, Neji continued, trying to pursue him alone would be incredibly reckless. There was more arguing about Hinata and Naruto's friends. Sakura looked down sorrowfully, regretting leaving her alone as self. Doubt began to consume her. She was aware of Hinata's depth of affection and the lengths she would go to for him. Earlier today, it was demonstrated. She couldn't possibly find him, and I doubt we could either. Shikamaru gave the order, enough. It's only been a few hours, she could be somewhere alone. Kakashi ignored their teasing and broke up the surrounding ninjas' panic. With no words, Kakashi began. Let's begin. The Akatsuki were hunting the Biju, and that includes our comrade Naruto. We have approximately 2.5 days before the extraction of the Kyuubi is completed. After that, Naruto will die, he said, closing his eyes at the thought. The new information was heard in a few whispers. We've counted on Naruto.kun before, now it's his turn to count on us, Lee exclaimed. The little cheering was joined by others. Kakashi collected the documents and laid them out neatly in piles, ignoring the interruption once more. They waited impatiently for more information. Some squads were hastily assembled and sent out earlier today. However, they went in blind, most without a sensory-type ninja and had no experience with the enemy. But now that we got more intel, your squads will replace them, Kakashi explained. He concluded by passing portfolios of the 3 potential candidates around the table. We're looking for Kisame Hoshigaki. Carries a large club-like sword, Samahata, one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Guy said, I recognize this guy from somewhere. Noticing Kisami's picture in the portfolio. Tenten shouted, wow, we fought him before Guy. Sensei, she chastised the green clad Jonin, asking, how can you forget such a shady character? Moving on, these are the more likely individuals. One goes by the name of Tobi. Height is approximately 5.7 feet. Wears a swirling orange mask with a hole on the right eye. He presented additional portfolios that detailed more. The others nodded in agreement as he explained, Another likely suspect is the one that helped attack this morning. Since she wasn't at the site of Naruto's disappearance, we can assume she's helped in Naruto's kidnapping. There's not much known about this Kunoichi. Katsuyu. Sama said her name was Konan. Neck. Length blue hair with an origami attached. Amber eyes with a height approximately 5.5 feet. Handing over the final portfolio. Shikamaru, who was still suffering from a broken leg, called out, "Kakashi. Sensei." Even though he had, these other people were far more intelligent and skilled than the one he had battled. Most of us are Chunin, how can we take down S-class criminals? He was most concerned about the person wearing the orange mask after learning about his skills from the others. I know. But the village is in trouble, we need every shinobi we can spare to protect it, but we must do something about Naruto, said Kakashi. I was informed that Danzo had sent out his own Anbu Black Ops to retrieve Naruto. Sai made the choice to add. Although he was grateful for the assistance, Kakashi remained cautious of him and nodded. Danzo would rather kill him than allow the Kyuubi to fall into the hands of the Akatsuki. Right, your mission is find any information of the Akatsuki regarding Naruto, possible bases or any of these three individuals, he stated. Along with the help of the Inuzuka and Aburame clan, they'll be able to alert us of any possible information you may receive, so that we can send you back up to take out the Akatsuki and rescue Naruto. Kakashi glanced at the people closest to Naruto. Iruka was there, but she spent the whole time staring pitifully at the ground. This is your mission. Each squad will head a particular direction, checking each town quickly. You'll set out immediately tonight. We only have 2.5 days to rescue him. Kakashi stated. Go. Everyone hurriedly gathered their teammates and equipment and started out. Konan pointed to the neighboring town and remarked, "We rest there." The younger girl nodded, and she saw it. She appeared worn out, and to be honest, Konan was too. Despite this, she made an effort to conceal their scent from tracker nindogs. An hour from sunset, the evening sun made it clear that the day was coming to an end. They both needed a change of clothes, Konan said. In some places, her cloaca, which represented Yahiko's Dreama, was torn and shredded, and Toba's fire jutsu burned some of the fabric on the bottom. She would be announcing to the world that she belonged to the Akatsuki by donning the cloak. She had to be more unobtrusive if she was going to slip across the land of fire. Fortunately, they had only raced through woods, and because of the girls, Keke Genkai managed to evade patrols that would have noticed them. Even though Konan appeared composed on the outside, her inner self was surprised that the younger girl could keep up with her. She also needed new clothes because she had a hole in her stomach and dried blood on her lavender sweater. As they got closer to the town, Konan removed her cloak to avoid drawing attention to herself. She quickly folded it and sealed it into a scroll, intending to wear it once they left town. She put the green book she had taken from Naruto into her tool pouch, as they would primarily be running through forests. Wearing the cloak was not necessary to draw attention to herself. The girl nodded in agreement when Konan suggested that they get a change of clothes. When it came to Naruto, Konan noticed that she was a shy girl who stammered a little. They saved their energy for their run by not talking much on the way here. She went on, "I'll cover our expenses." Ryo from the Akatsuki was abundant in her possession. She didn't expect to have any money because they abruptly left the leaf. Hinata glanced at the woman next to her and was surprised to see her wearing such revealing apparel beneath the Akatsuki cloak. She assumed she had taken it off to avoid drawing unwanted attention. But at least to Hinata, she would draw another sort of unwanted attention. In her tool pouch, she placed a green book that she had noted. She wore a navy blue robe that exposed her shoulders, belly, and most of her back. For Hinata, the revelation of the lateral portion of her breast sealed the deal. She would never even consider dressing like that. She advised, "Check the town for any shinobi before we enter." After complying promptly, Hinata discovered that no one had any chakra networks resembling those of a ninja. She informed her now partner of this information right away. "Well, let's use the transformation jutsu so no one recognizes us." Both of them executed the jutsu, and Hinata changed into a blonde teen with blue eyes and a yukata, while Konan changed into a black-haired woman wearing a more conservative yukata. They both appeared ordinary. She changed into a forgettable person without the eyes, which somewhat impressed Konan. It was necessary that they blend in with the crowd so that no one would recognize them. Fearful of losing her, Hinata trailed closely behind. They hurried through a number of shops, assembling necessary supplies and equipment. Hinata was taken aback by the quantity of paper bombs she purchased for herself, but she remained silent and continued into another store. After looking for and putting on their favorite outfit, Konan purchased all of their equipment and clothing, as well as 3 dark red cloaks that resembled the Akatsuki's but lacked any designs. As they left the store, She closed the cloaks and made their way to a hotel nearby. She whispered, "Some Konoha ninja just entered the town." She hadn't recognized the person. Both kunoichi entered the hotel after paying more than the required amount and a personal bribe that persuaded the receptionist to keep their presence a secret. "Let us get out of sight." They arrived at their room, which was modest and uncomplicated, but it made no difference. There was a bathroom right to the left when you walked in, and 2 beds were positioned at opposite ends in the room's corner. Between the beds was a table that was knee high. She said to the teenager with the midnight hair, "I'll get us something to eat." She made a paper clone, fed it some Ryo, and dispatched it. She said, Conan.san. Conan glanced up at her, and saw that they had lost their transformation. What happened earlier today? Conan asked herself as she sat down at the table. Hinata followed suit and listened to her as she recollected the earlier incidents. Hinata observed that her eyes were filled with a quiet sadness. Unlike the other Akatsuki she had heard about, she appeared to value peace. Rewind as the life left her childhood friend's eyes, Conan watched in silent grief. With eyes full of gratitude and a hint of melancholy, Naruto Uzumaki stood silently. Maybe you were correct to put your faith in this young man, Nagato, she reflected. After a moment of silence, Conan started to wrap him in a coffin made of paper. The sudden chakra she felt caused her eyes to widen in surprise. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. She spun around in a moment to see Naruto and herself being approached by a massive wall of fire that was too big to safely avoid the flames. She was too slow to dodge or gather her chakra to stop or reroute the attack because she was unprepared for the unexpected assault. She closed her eyes due to the brightness as the jutsu swiftly approached and she felt a wave of heat burning her skin. Instead of experiencing the pain she had anticipated, she felt a protective embrace and her feet lifted off the ground as she was launched through the air. The heat caused parts of her skin to blister and parts of her cloak to singe. She heard a cry of pain, but it wasn't coming from her. When she opened her eyes after feeling the impact of hitting the ground, she saw that she had truly rescued Naruto. "Naruto, are you okay?" she exclaimed rapidly as she felt the rush of adrenaline from the slight pain she was experiencing and the unexpected threat that was still present. She clambered off his chest and prepared for combat. She asked, "Why did you try to save me?" He joked, "If I couldn't save a damsel in distress, what kind of hero would I be?" She figured it was a coping mechanism to get rid of the pain that was already getting better. She heard his deep, familiar voice say, "Well, aren't you the funny one, Naruto Uzumaki?" He stood in front of them, emerging through the smoke, directly next to Nagato's body. Tobi gritted her teeth in a mocking rage. "I see that Nagato's Rinnegan is already here." Tobi just said, "Not quite, but yes." Naruto reached for him and started to move before she could react. He screamed, "I won't let you," and sent a clone flying in his direction while holding a bright circular sphere. The clones just went through, but Conan was able to keep throwing paper shuriken at him because of this. He was unable to teleport his target. The entire attack just went through him. He retreated from their proximity. She hurriedly clarified, "Naruto can't do that jutsu for an extended period of time. 5 minutes," was her final statement. She pointed out that although Naruto nodded, he was worn out from his battle with the 6 pads of pain. As he breathed heavily, he said, "Gonna need you to protect me while I collect nature energy." "Got it," she gave a sympathetic nod. "Give me 2 minutes," and then abruptly stopped. My, you really are quite the interesting boy, aren't you? Getting Nagato and Conan to betray me like this," he said. He concluded, "That is quite peculiar for a hothead like you to be standing so eerily still," but Naruto's intense focus did not respond. "I'm your opponent, Tobi," Conan answered. She swiftly created a large number of paper clones laced with paper bombs and sent them in his direction, sending more paper shuriken in rapid succession. She could feel the rock and dust hitting her clothes and the air becoming cloudy as there were a lot of explosions. She could feel the technique draining her chakra. She would have been much more effective and able to employ a jutsu she desired if she hadn't fought today. It appeared that Naruto needed more time, but at least she bought him some valuable time to enter Sage mode. Tobi was totally unharmed as the explosions continued and ceased. There were no more paper bombs for Conan to fill clones. "Conan, I can be quite reasonable, so I'll let you live and return Nagato's body if you help me capture the Jinchuriki," he said. "Never," was her cool response. Shame. Strangely, he didn't avoid the paper shuriken she threw at him, and the many of them pierced him. The strange reality warped her a little. Genjutsu is the sign she quickly forms to let herself go. He materialized directly in front of her as she was doing so, swiftly reaching out and choking her. It was difficult for her to breathe because of the pressure on her throat. She felt pain as she tried to escape his tightening hold. Die. She managed to make out, and she experienced a spiral distortion of her vision. She surrendered to her death. She heard a loud screech and felt the constriction in her throat loosen. She began to fall and thought she would hit the ground, but something carried her and she felt safe again. To get rid of the blackness around the edges of her eyes, she coughed a lot and took deep breaths too fast. Naruto yelled, "Don't touch her!" As there was a loud explosion. Still attempting to recover, she was gently lowered to the ground. She heard him remark, "I didn't expect you to throw that Rasengan variant or for it to expand." As he turned to face the explosion, he concluded, "Quite the number of attacks too." "It must have been the jutsu you defeated Kakazu with," Konan said, bringing her to her feet shakily as he recovered. Then he vanished. She turned to face Naruto to inquire about his whereabouts when she noticed Tobi swiftly reappearing behind him and trying to use his jutsu by touching him. She didn't need to warn him because Naruto, who has inhuman reflexes, swung at him. She heard the sound of breaking bones echoing through the air as he was flung through the air and struck a big rock hard, breaking it. Dead, he went limp. "It's finished," Naruto answered. She sighed quietly in relief at his loss. She was astounded by the power of Naruto's attack and the skill he had displayed. When she saw his body vanish, she heard him gasp and pondered why. The power of Sage Mode. She believed it to be genjutsu, but the rock maintained its shape and she didn't experience any genjutsu like sensations. A blade pressed against her neck, and she felt it. Naruto swiftly pivoted to confront her. He praised, "I guess I severely underestimated you. You're the second person to hit me." She felt the blade press harder against her neck as Naruto twitched in rage. She heard him whisper softly, using Izanagi. "I thought I never had to resort to that." And he calmed down. Sage Mode is quite the jutsu. Using chakra in conjunction with physical attacks is quite the technique I didn't expect. "Packs quite the punch," he said about the stone. Threatened, Naruto said, "Let her go." A portion of the Kyuubi's chakra was leaking out, and she could feel it. He said, "Oha, I will if you come with me quietly." She could see the seriousness in his eyes at the offer, and he quickly relaxed. She screamed, "He's lying," but was restrained by an iron grip, making it difficult for her to move even an inch. He proposed, "Although I'll just dispose of Nagato for such disobedience," but she felt sick at his suggestion, thinking, surely Naruto wouldn't even. Naruto said, "I'll do it." She felt deceived and gaped at him. He was meant to be a peacemaker. He lost the orange tint around his eyes. She was unable to speak and her cries were barely audible. "Don't." It was disregarded. "I knew you would listen to reason," she said as she experienced headache pain, abrupt lightheadedness and a blackness that began to engulf her. She willed herself not to faint as she felt the ground strike her knees and palms. She raised her gaze to the blonde's dazzling blue eyes. Looking at him, she said, "You'll die." She heard him say, "What kind of hero? Let someone die, you know." Konan watched as Tobi struck him in the head, rendering him unconscious. She heard a shadow clone, she assumed, dissipate above her as he slumped to the ground. She stumbled when she attempted to stand up. She looked on helplessly as Naruto and Nagato vanished from view. The words, "Thanks for your help, Konan," were spoken as he vanished into thin air. She recovered far too slowly for her comfort. She had to leave before they noticed her because they were close to the village. She noticed a green book that must have been left behind by Naruto on the ground. She swiftly picked it up and put it in her cloak after remembering it earlier. She fell to the ground as she tried to run. The only sensible course of action, thinking quickly, was to hide and hope she wouldn't be discovered. The flashback is over. As she concluded her account of what had happened, she said, "I don't quite understand why he did that. He held the last Biju. He would have potentially saved the world if he hadn't let me live," she said. Hinata remarked, "That's who he is." She didn't know Naruto as well as she did, and she could see the confusion in her eyes. Konan wanted an explanation as he gazed at the young leaf Kunoichi. He protects people he considers precious, even at the cost of his own life, she said. "I see," was Konan's humble response. Precious sounded a little strange, especially considering that she had assisted in Jiraiya's murder. He truly is forgiving. Only 5 other people in her life thought she was valuable or were valuable to her, and they were all deceased. Hinata repeated, He never gives up, it is why I love him," with a small smile. It was impossible for Konan not to return the gesture. Konan remarked, "I see that you have selected a wonderful lover," in her stoic attitude. WH. What? Hinata flinched back. As Konan watched, her face took on a rosy hue. Her complexion was so pale that even the slightest blush could be seen. She stumbled over her words, and she watched with interest. She questioned, Are you two not together? She was embarrassed and shook her head. Oh. I assumed because Nagato made a comment about the both of you. She offered an apology. She calmed herself by taking several deep breaths. She is a really shy person. Her face gradually stopped flushing. She questioned, "WH. What sort of comment? About love and sacrifice, and about how it breeds hatred," she said, closing her eyes because she disliked discussing the past. Konan first believed he could control it, but he hadn't used the chakra against Tobi at all. His rage consumed him. He nearly transformed into the Kyuubi because of you. When Hinata heard that he was changing, she almost turned into it because of her, and it made her shiver. Without allowing any room for debate, Konan proposed, "Let's stop talking about the past. Only the future matters now." "Hi," was her response. Hinata answered the door when someone knocked. After bringing in a tray of food and placing it on the table, a waiter hurried off because the food had already been paid for. A number of food containers were present, containing red bean soup, grilled fish, and rice. Hinata's hunger rumbled in her empty stomach. After running all day, she became aware that she hadn't eaten since the early hours of the morning. She and Konan took their seats again. As she arranged some portions for herself, Konan remarked, "I wasn't quite sure what you liked." "It's okay," she said, taking a bowl of red bean soup. They ate their food courteously while sitting in cozy silence. Hinata considered the irony of a Jinchuriki being saved by a former Akatsuki member. It was also improbable that she would partner with this woman. She chose to put her trust in her so quickly, which was a little strange. She must have been overcome by her desire to save him. It was too late to turn back now. Hinata questioned the woman with the amber eyes. "They'll be looking for you, right?" "Hi, they most likely assumed I had help in the kidnapping with Naruto-san," she responded. "We'll be getting no help then." Hinata swallowed when she considered what would happen if she did. "Correct, we also can't risk getting captured or slowed down. They'll interrogate me and we won't be able to reach him in time." The statement, "but I'm certain with my skills, we won't run into trouble at all," made Hinata feel more at ease. "We can't fail," declared Hinata. The fiery resolve in her eyes reminded Konan of the kind of eyes Naruto used when he and Nagato conversed. "It's not even a possibility." Naruto detested this. He detested everything. How long he had been screaming at this unending emptiness was unknown to him. Everywhere he went, every thought he had was tinged with doubt. It would be so much better than this agonizing loneliness if he had someone to be with. His greatest phobia. He glanced at the people who had appeared in front of him with hope. I'm glad he wasn't alone at last. They didn't recognize him, though. The individuals looked past him rather than at him. If they did, their eyes were filled with hate, disdain, and terror. In a ball, Naruto crawled up. He was still alone, but there were now people. Worse, being totally alone with everyone around you or knowing that you're alone with no one around you only served to remind him of his past. He detested it. In a ball, Naruto crawled. Things became increasingly worse. The loneliness was no longer the only thing. The hatred was almost unbearable and wanted to devour him. It hovered over him, awaiting the breaking of his will. His strength kept slipping away, even though he wanted it to stop. Was there anybody? The shadows grew deeper. Was nobody there? Naruto was near death. He was unable to fight it any longer and had no desire to do so. He was no longer concerned. How could he be loved? The abyss rushed in his direction. The reason is that I love you. For a while, the hatred ceased. How was she able to love me? As doubt began to gnaw at him, it moved forward. Why? What? He questioned himself. She doesn't love me. It began to creep more quickly. A lie. When it got to him, it began to eat away at him. He didn't anticipate feeling anything, but he was angry. Complete hatred. Not at her, but at his own frailty and surrender. So, why did she do that? He was more hesitant to decline this. He put up a fierce fight against it. That's not how Hinata is at all. He encountered strong opposition as he pushed the hatred back. I've never met someone as gentle and kind as her. He pushed it farther and farther away as he persisted in fighting it. He screamed, she's not that kind of person. She'd never lie. He began to recall everyone who had been present. His friends were now there, along with those he valued and those who had passed away, including Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Tsunade. He confronted the source of the hatred and encountered strong opposition. He questioned whether any of them thought he was valuable. He was pushed back by the hatred, which did not go away. No. Nagato. Dad, Konan, Hinata, Jiraiya. Where the hatred was greatest, he began to push back. He would never be able to give up. They believed in me, and I never. He began to dispel the darkness, and it began to vanish. I never go back on my word. The mass of hatred vanished. never to be seen again. That's how I'm ninja. Hinata and Konan, who have been trying to reach Naruto for 2 days, walked side by side on an unutilized path, taking a brief break from running. A number of dark clouds hung over the sky, threatening to rain, and warm rays of the late afternoon sun occasionally passed through. This was pleasant in contrast to the cold air that breezed through the clearings and trails that two kunoichi were walking through. Hinata reached for her neck, but the Hite.8 was not there because it would have revealed her identity. Her own eyes were well known, so she used a minor genjutsu to ward off any inquisitive bystanders. Since they were far from civilization, they couldn't risk being captured, so she removed her genjutsu and looked at the blue-haired woman next to her. She was still wearing the Akatsuki cloak, so Hinata questioned her judgment, asking, "Is she still loyal?" She only had to hope it was something else. "Leap!" Konan shouted quickly. 5 members of the Anbu Black Ops appeared before them, along with a nin.dog, and they assumed a battle-ready stance after both kunoichi easily dodged a few shuriken thrown their way and swiftly turned around to face the threat from the direction of the thrown weapons. A voice without emotion said, "The portfolio matches the blue hair and the Akatsuki cloak." They assessed both of their opponents, and Hinata saw that one of them used kenjutsu. Those eyes and the unmarked forehead. "The Hyuga heiress," he said stoically. "The civilian was useful," another said. "Oh no," Hinata muttered. Hinata nodded and prepared herself for the impending battle by assuming her gentle fist stance. "We'll keep them alive if you wish," Hinata said, nodding, so that she could return to the village more easily. "We must get rid of the nin.dog. Covering our scent takes time to get into effect," Konan whispered to the girl. Hinata felt a little shiver when they said, "A traitor working with the Akatsuki deserves to die." "These are no regular Anbu," she said, as each side stood tensely, waiting for the other to attack. Hinata let out a shaky breath and activated her Byakugan. The woman next to her stood quietly and motionless, observing that everyone here was confident in their abilities, their heartbeats slow, and their muscles not twitched in the least bit. "For Naruto-kun," she said, feeling her own heartbeat quickly and her own lip quiver in mild fear. One of the Anbu closed the distance between them far too quickly for her liking, with the other 3 pursuing Konan and the final one protecting the nin.dog. Her opponent moved swiftly, and Hinata ducked quick blows while avoiding his blade. She pulled out her own kunai to block an attack on her face, then quickly released it and launched a few of her own attacks with her soft fist, but her opponent quickly retreated, saying, "I'll have to end this quick, I can't keep up with him forever." The Anbu suddenly sprang forward with an overhead strike, and because Hinata was too slow to react, she was able to deflect it clumsily, but he quickly delivered 3 more strikes. When he brought his sword back up, Hinata deflected a slice, and the other strike was swift and aimed at her neck, but she blocked it. It had much more power, and she momentarily lost her foothold and swayed back, unable to defend herself. Seeing his opportunity, he was about to deliver the fatal blow, but she managed to launch herself away, and she rolled onto her knees. Unfazed by her escape, he moved quickly to end her with another overhead slash. "I'm sorry for this, but this is for Naruto-kun." She ruthlessly attacked him with all her might, closing his vital chakra points to stop his movement, and he slumped to the ground incapacitated. She quickly scanned the battlefield ready for more trouble. Hinata saw that Konan had already dealt with 2 of the Anbu, but the other one was being more cautious. She was on her feet before he recovered after a paper shuriken struck the blade with enough force to shift its descent to Hinata's left, barely missing her. "Konan-san, more Anbu squads will arrive in 900 meters," at her cry, the nin.dog and the Anbu both started to back off. The paper shuriken was destroyed by a fire-style jutsu, so she leapt into the air for a clearer shot, hoping her next jutsu would work. "Don't let the nin.dog get away," Konan simply replied, sending more of them in that direction, not caring if they were killed. Hinata could only agree with her hidden meaning. Rescuing Naruto was far more important. Vacuum air palm, 8 trigrams. Konan didn't hesitate to finish off the nin.dog with a few paper shuriken, but Hinata looked away, saying, It's necessary." She yelled out, and a compressed air burst hurtled towards them like a bullet, striking the 2 Anbu and nin.dog hard. Unprepared for the deadly quick attack, they slammed against the ground. Turning to Hinata, she asked, "Do the other group have a nin.dog with them?" Hinata shook her head, and Konan nodded. "I don't want to take risks. Give me your Hite.8 or pieces of your clothing," she said, reaching into her tool pouch and giving it to Konan right away. She watched as she tore off the fabric attached to the metal piece and a large piece of her Akatsuki cloak, making paper clones of them, giving them multiple pieces of each, and sending them off in different directions. She made a lot of paper clones and sent them along, thinking it was just a diversionary tactic for their escape. South. East, was Hinata's quick response, pointing a finger in that direction. Konan gave back what was left of her Hide.8. The amber-eyed Kunoichi added, we run at this pace until dusk. Hinata nodded, wholeheartedly agreeing, as it would mean they would be closer to saving him. Run quickly, Konan said, and she started running off the path they were on. Hinata quickly obeyed and followed her, heading northeast through the woods. Their pace was quick and urgent, and she felt her muscles ache at the brief break. She said, thank you, Konan-san, for interfering with her battle. No matter how temporary, she said simply, we're partners, Hinata-san. Go again. What's that saying? After giving it some thought and attempting to remember the exact words, Naruto said, out of the something and into the pan. That sounds stupid, he yelled, wondering if the ever-shrinking fox heard him. Naruto lay down on the water in the sewer-like room, staring at nothing in particular as he recalled everything that had happened after he had emerged from that terrible white abyss. I wonder if Gaara saw the same. It wasn't a pleasant experience, and he never wanted to experience it again. Now that he had too much time to think, he never thought this much in his life, and it was agonizing. Even if I die, that's a bad thing. The village may not like me, but all that matters is my friends, he said, lifting his fist into the air and letting it drop to the ground a moment later. He reflected on all of his friends from the previous year, as well as his triumphs, failures, and regrets. He said, not one bit, adding, at least she was pretty. A pretty girl saved me, it's only right that I get to save one too, he sighed. The last day kept playing back to him. Sorry Hinata. He never would be bring peace, that he'd been entrusted with. Dad. His words to him, and he realized something his dad had said. Naruto chose to glance at the cage, a glance to his left. Are you without a name? He questioned the fox. What makes you curious? The fox responded, choosing to be more forgiving of his Jinchuriki. The Kyuubi remained silent and searched the bars of his prison for anything that Naruto knew about his ancestry. Well, after thinking so damn much I thought, hey, he's gotta have name. You can't just be called the Kyuubi, Naruto said, still lying down. Come on. I'm going to die, am I correct? Naruto told him, if I'm going to die, I want to know your name, since these Akatsuki got us. The Kyuubi didn't see any dishonesty. He genuinely believed it, and he would ultimately choose to make fun of him. Kurama. Was his final response. Kurama was a little taken aback when he said, Kurama huh. I'm sorry I failed Kurama. He had been silently watching Naruto since he was a child, especially after he became a ninja, and he searched, but all he could find in his voice was sincerity. He's not smart enough to plan ahead anyway. Kurama poked fun at him, anticipating his typical ebullient response. Humph. I would be free if the fourth Hokage didn't seal me back. Yes. Maybe you could have gone free. Kurama was now taken back, but you didn't. It's all in the past now. Perhaps there was one thing I regret. Kurama looked interested in what he had to say. We could have taken down that masked man. Together. As a team. Kurama laughed at his suggestion. Collaborate with you. You're a funny one, Kurama said, laughing further. Turning away, Naruto said, I'm serious. Do the other ones, like you, have names too? They do. I hate them, was Kurama's somewhat perplexed response. When the fox didn't respond, Nagato went on, saying, you can't always have hated Kurama. Both hate and sacrifice are bred by love. You got your hate from somewhere, Kurama. He backed off from his questioning when he heard the fox growling. I guess, he concluded, I wish I could have taken your hate away. Kurama looked intently at Naruto. Kurama inquired inquisitively, what would you have done, if you somehow got out without me? I would bring peace to the shinobi world, save you, and save the other Bijus too. He slouched his fist back down after declaring once more, except, I'm going to die. At least the Akatsuki was nice enough for me to accept it. The sun was low in the horizon, signaling the end of another day, and dark clouds hung overhead, creating a dying drizzle over the landscape. Two people, soaked from hours of running in the light rain, slowly made their way into a cave and, using the cave wall as support, fell to the ground with their backs to the wall. Konan and Hinata lay panting from the effort they forced themselves to endure. Sweat trickling down their faces as they attempted to control their labored breathing, their limb muscles aching and shaking in protest, and after a few long minutes, they were able to calm down. She briefly closed her eyes and said, we were lucky, they were over. Confident and they paid for their mistakes. They were quite skilled, she said, adding that she wasn't sure she could take on a 6-man team at once. They shouldn't be able to track either. It was fortunate it started raining. Hi. Hinata exhaled, and Konan noticed that she was worn out from the hours of running they had done. To be honest, the running, the brief battle with the Anbu, the concealing of their tracks, and the dozens of paper clones she had created had left her out of breath. While she was good, she lacked Nagato's physical strength and stamina. Only Naruto could have matched the enormous amount of chakra and stamina. Konan watched Hinata activate her Kekkei Genkei. I don't see anybody inside. After a few minutes of searching, she said, a 10-kilometer radius. Konan nodded in agreement, saying, very helpful for infiltration. How far are we from Naruto-kun? It took Konan a moment to realize how near they were. We're actually hours away, she said in her usual composed manner, observing her questioning eyes. We're in no condition to fight, she concluded, Hinata's eyes downcast with worry, shame, and anger. Both of us aren't capable of fighting, she said again, trying to reassure her, and she saw her nod, so she left it at that. If Tobi should have gotten help. Today would be the deadline. She didn't voice these doubts because they had pushed themselves too far and she wouldn't be able to fight her all against Tobi for a diversion. Since you've been spotted with me, you do know what that means, she said to the pale girl. Konan nodded in agreement as she responded, I'll be a rogue ninja, but I'll do anything to save him. Can I ask you something, Konan-san? You may, she asked. Why do you still wear that Akatsuki cloak? Konan briefly averted his gaze before Hinata apologized. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. For a moment, Konan thought, I was responsible for those Anbu showing up. She took a deep, silent breath. It's okay, she said, adding, it's my fault that those Anbu saw us. Not at all. The girl with the midnight hair said, I should have been looking for any ninja. Konan gave her a contemplative glance. So I suppose we ought to be more careful the next time. It was once designed by a precious person of mine. He wanted peace for the world and Naruto-san now inherited those ideals, Hinata said, wiping out terrible memories from the past as she answered your question. Hinata nodded in agreement and waited patiently. It took a few moments to reply. She thanked him, saying, I see, thank you sharing that with me Konan-san. She was wearing a damp pullover pale lavender sweater with white sleeves that ended at the shoulders. Konan noticed that she was shivering from the cold, and he looked at her tarnished cloak, which was heavily damaged from running in the weather, with a large hole on the right side of her waist and some fabric at the bottom that had started to unthread. She couldn't wear it any longer, unless she wanted to further destroy it. She picked herself up and reached into a small pack she had carried since Naruto had been taken, and removed a scroll from inside. Take it, your sweater is wet and you need to keep warm, since we won't make a fire. Hinata watched curiously, wondering what she was doing, and then she got her answer when she opened the scroll and 3 dark red cloaks materialized. She picked up the 2 smaller ones and gave one to her, and as she did so, she watched Konan remove her own cloak and put it away with the other cloak, which she assumed was for Naruto. Hi. Of course, she said as she hurriedly put it on. The cloak concealed her hands and arms, and the bottom fabric only reached her shins. She discovered that the cloak had a large hood that was sufficient to conceal her eyes, which she was grateful for because any ninja could tell she was a Hyuga. She would need it for the return trek, as she is now a rogue ninja, hopefully for a short time. Konan said, we can't risk going into the nearby town, so we'll stay here for tonight. Hinata nodded in agreement and sat back down, her cloak comfortable and thick. I'll take first watch, she said, barely hearing herself, as she fell asleep, thinking of Naruto. As he waited for the day to come, Konan said, I hope we're not too late. What will happen, I wonder. Have you found anything, Fukasaku? Sama? The old sage's sorrowful headshake crushed Kakashi's hopes that he would nod and say that he was alive and that they had saved Naruto, his sensei's student. He felt pain and clung more tightly to the edge of the table, filled with hatred for the masked man and for his own great failure. Is this what Minato sensei felt when? Not even with the help of the toads. Kakashi said in an emotionless voice. The Inuzukas, Aburames, and the Hyugas couldn't. Kakashi closed his eyes, feeling the same pain as when Rin had passed and Obito had passed. Minato sensei. No one found him. Kakashi said, slowly leaving the tent as the day came to an end and the bright crescent moon hung overhead, shrouding the village in a black abyss of darkness. Remember all squads. We have a village to protect. He closed his eye. The Chunin in front of the tent nodded and hurried to send messenger hawks and the like. How am I supposed to tell them? Kakashi thought to himself. Their mission had failed. Naruto didn't even get to see the cheers everyone had planned for him. Everyone here, the ones who were sent out, had the personal desire to rescue him. It wasn't just another mission to fulfill. Kakashi wanted to kill the man because he wouldn't see that everyone was proud of him. 7 people were standing on the fingers of an enigmatic statue in a cave while a ritual was being performed. Sasuke cut his chakra link to the statue, feeling a little exhausted, thinking, this stupid thing is finally over. The others around him had also cut theirs, and Sasuke grinned as the body fell from the height, the chakra link no longer holding him. The person who went by the name Madara jumped down below to see how he was doing, wanting to see why he was so interested in a weakling. He's dead, isn't he? What's so fascinating about him? Bored, Sasuke inquired. He leaned down to feel for a pulse, saying, just making sure, in case the Sharingan missed something. Why are you so cautious? The Tobi couldn't fool a Sharingan, Sasuke said, lightly kicking Naruto's lifeless legs. I would have preferred to kill him myself. Guess you can't get everything. He was irritated by his lack of response. Interesting. Guess a half one doesn't cut it then. I'm a bit disappointed, Tobi said. Sasuke wanted answers, so he asked, what do you mean? There's nothing to worry about, he got back up. Anyway. As he made his way to the entrance, Sasuke declared, I'll be returning to Konoha to get rid of the vermin. A 5-cage summit is being convened. Sasuke said, ignoring him, and walked on. Danzo will be there as Hokage. Sasuke halted, his Sharingan flaring at the term. Where? He inquired icily. Tobi answered, in the land of iron, 7 days from now. The words, Suigetsu, Karen, Jugo, let's go, were promptly obeyed by all, who leapt off his hands and pursued him. The final words Sasuke heard as he entered the hall were, White Zetsu will help you infiltrate when you get to the border. The bright morning sun slowly made its way across the landscape. With water droplets clinging to plants and leaves from yesterday night's rain, the air felt humid. The sun was shining on the forest, and 2 people were moving stealthily toward their goal. They were in a vibrant forest where a variety of animals and insects were dancing. In anticipation of the next day, birds sang their morning song. Both blue-haired Kunoichi walked in silence, both in anticipation and anxiety, despite the forest's vibrancy. Here, they save what is valuable to them. Hinata and Konan made their way cautiously in the direction of the Akatsuki base. Since Konan had mentioned the possibility, scouts had been stationed nearby. Even with her Kekkei Genkei, Hinata kept her Byakugan moving slowly. The best outcomes would be achieved through infiltration and a surprise attack. With every step they took in the direction of the base, Hinata could feel the blood pulsing through her veins and her heart rate rising. Nothing that would resemble a stronghold caught her attention. Hinata whispered, Konan-san. Where is this base? She had to trust her, so she held herself back from drawing any conclusions. I'm not surprised you can't see it. The base was mostly likely concealed with a sealing jutsu to stop curious eyes like yours from discovering it, she responded with composure. The girl with the pale eyes said, I see. A former Akatsuki base told her about the jutsu trap. It makes sense, she said, expressing her worry. She said, will there be any traps? No, since I have this, Konan said, pointing to a ring she had on her right middle finger. This will allow us to bypass traps that would have triggered without it, Konan said. Both of them moved closer to the base after Hinata nodded in agreement with her explanation. They both readied themselves for potential ambushes. Hinata continued to look around, searching for anything unusual. She observed that even though Konan presented a composed front, she was also nervous. Some of Konan's movements were stiff, and her heart was beating a little quicker than usual. Hinata became even more uneasy because Konan showed no signs of these symptoms during yesterday's battle with the Anbu. Hinata saw a tiny ceiling tag on the rock wall where Konan had stopped. This base must be inside this cliff of rock. When Hinata heard Konan say, listen to me, she turned to face her. You will immediately depart with Naruto-san after we save him, and I will divert their attention for as long as possible, Hinata exclaimed. Konan closed her eyes and said, Konan-san, what about you? She opened her eyes, and Hinata could see the resolve and acceptance in them. We must do what we possibly can for Naruto-san, she said. All she could do was nod. Hinata would have followed suit. Hinata watched as she touched the rock with the ring on her finger as Konan turned back to face it. The boulder eventually rolled noisily inside the base, revealing a path to them. Hinata trailed behind Konan as he cautiously moved inside. See anything more now that we're inside? She inquired. I cannot, she swallowed. Being inside the base of S-rank ninjas made her heart race. Knowing that she would give her life to save him, she found some small solace in being alone. She felt blind, and her eyes darted all over the place because she couldn't see through any walls. Some lanterns illuminated the hallways as they moved through the walls and floors of flat rock. After making several turns, Konan came to a stop in front of a hall. Hinata could feel the tension making her breathe rapidly and deeply. With a cautious glance down the hallway, Konan poked her head slightly to check for anything that might be waiting for them. Hinata hugged the wall as she followed her down the hall, imitating her cautious, quiet steps. She noticed a big room at the end of the hall. She could feel Konan's heart pounding more rapidly with every step. Hinata bit her lips in an attempt to regulate her breathing, but it didn't work out as planned. She deactivated her Byakugan because she could no longer stand the shaking in her limbs. She felt somewhat at ease, and the silent procedure down the hall seemed to go on forever. They abruptly came to a halt at the room's edge. Konan looked over once more, and she watched. She stopped. Hinata peeped for herself after a long time. She glanced around the room quickly, but initially saw nothing. Then she noticed a single, orange-colored body on the ground. Silently, she muttered, "Naruto." Regardless of whether there were any Akatsuki nearby, she took a few steps toward leaving the hall. Konan trailed behind in silence. The cloak Hinata was wearing weighed heavily with each step as she approached him slowly. "No," she said, her lips quivering and her limbs beginning to shake. In desperation, not fear. The crushing reality hit her again and again with every step she took in his direction. When she got to him, she could see his serene face. She dropped to her knees and knelt next to him. Her vision became blurry as her throat tightened violently and tears streamed down. She was indifferent. Because, in front of her eyes, he was dead. She wept over him, her tears dampening his old jacket, which she cherished seeing him in. Konan let out a few whimpers before closing her eyes in despair. When Hinata realized that she would never again see one of his dazzling smiles. Before burying herself in his jacket, she lets her loud sobs be heard for a brief moment. Desperately, he gripped his jacket. She heard, "Don't cry." Nada. She felt a warm hand touch hers, and her eyes popped open. She stood up and stared into his azure eyes, denying that she had heard him. Life in cerulean eyes. With a feeble smile, he said, "Look at that. Too beautiful and angels." He squeaked his voice. "Naruto-kun." She blurted out. His eyes were impossible for anyone to imitate. She hurried over and placed his head and shoulders on her lap to support him. She shed more tears of joy at the realization that it was indeed him. "Hey, Nada," he said with another feeble grin. With haste and desperation, Hinata quickly covered his lips with hers in her joy. When she moved her lips over his, Naruto acquiesced feebly. Hinata saw that his lips were cracked and his mouth was dry. She ignored her blush and quickly withdrew her kiss. He went on, "Tastes so good." She turned to face Konan, who was already holding a bottle of water in her direction, ignoring another intense flush at the remark. "Thank you." She made sure he didn't drown in it by carefully reaching for it with her free hand. He looked much better after being nursed for a few minutes and having a full bottle drained. With her lips quivering from his well-being and her throat still hurting, Hinata watched as he breathed slowly. "I'm so happy." "Why, you're okay and Naruto-kun." He grinned a little wider than before. Exhausted, he closed his eyes. "I want that other good-tasting stuff," said he. At his request, Hinata's complexion turned red, contrasting with it. Much more timidly than before, she leaned down tentatively again. Even though his face was colorless, his eyes had a muted expression, and his face was smudged in multiple places. He seemed just as attractive to Hinata as ever. As she pressed her lips closer to his, her lips quivered. Hinata felt his lips slowly moving with hers once more as he unexpectedly closed the small gap. Hinata gripped his jacket and his hair that ended up there as they kissed slowly and passionately. His tongue tasted her as it moved slowly over her lips. Reluctantly, Hinata let go of the kiss after realizing she was out of breath. To calm herself, she inhaled deeply. He hummed with delight, As he licked his lips, Hinata's blush deepened and his heart began to beat rapidly. At the change in her feelings, she shook her head and hung over him in a protective manner. After looking around to be on guard in case of an ambush, Konan added, "I apologize for breaking such an intimate moment, but we must move before anyone finds us here." "Oh, of course." Hinata blushed and vanished after a brief moment. They had to return to reality because they might still be in danger, she said. "Can you carry him?" She wasn't sure she could carry him comfortably, protect him in the event of an unexpected attack, or even focus on him. With him, Konan could react more quickly. "As you wish, Hinata-san." She assisted her in slowly lifting him. He appeared to try to assist as well, but the strain caused him to start breathing heavily. He said slowly, still with his eyes half closed, "Ramen. Ramen would taste amazing." Right now, after he had recovered from his breath, Hinata was given a small pack by Konan to carry. Konan went on to say, "He seems quite delirious, listening to him discuss ramen. With her Byakugan flaring, she observed the younger girl nod in agreement. Konan took a position beneath him and gave him a piggyback. She began carrying him to the base's exit, making sure she was comfortable and that she was comfortable too. The words, "You will take point Hinata-san," were promptly followed by her, who then began searching the hallways for any indication of adversaries. Naruto, meanwhile, made the decision to settle in a little more. "You're very warm," he said quietly as he tightened his hold on her. The remark was enough to make Konan grunt. She continued down the hallways, approaching the exit but remaining vigilant for any unexpected assault. As he pressed his right cheek against her left, he said, "Really, soft too." Ignoring his words and actions, she remarked, "You're not entirely yourself, Naruto-san. But, you're my angel too," he said, lovingly stroking his cheek with hers. The remark and unexpected display of affection startled Konan once more. It was strange that she was being addressed so personally outside of a megacure. They eventually reached outside, ignoring him once more, and Konan hurriedly closed the base's door. "We'll get back to the cave as soon as possible," Konan said. She gave a nod, and they hurried full speed in the direction of their previous camp. "Keep a constant watch with your Kekkei Hinata-san." Naruto made the decision to carry on with his previous course of action halfway there. Konan had assumed that his deep, soothing breathing indicated that he was asleep. It became evident that he wasn't until he spoke. He took deeper breaths and said casually, "You smell nice." Konan disregarded an emotion. "I wonder." She made an effort to ignore him, but it was difficult because his husky voice was directly in her ears. "If you..." She could feel him humming in satisfaction at the vibrations she experienced. "Taste just as good as nada." This time, Konan couldn't ignore it as her cheeks blushed slightly. He reached down a little, just above her chest, and it grew deeper. As he drifted off to sleep, she heard a faint snore. 4 hours prior, when Naruto opened his eyes slowly, all he saw was darkness. He was perplexed and unsure of his location. He attempted to move, but his limbs refused to cooperate. He attempted to talk, but it came across as too harsh. He attempted to move his limbs again this time, and the slight movement caused him to begin breathing deeply. At least he wasn't paralyzed, he thought as his fingers and toes twitched. He tried to recall his location. He tried to breathe as little as possible because his throat hurt every time he inhaled. Water was all he could think. Although he was unable to identify the reason, Naruto felt much more empty. Even though he was in dire need of water, his body refused to cooperate. He had never felt so helpless, and he felt completely too weak right now. A few memories flashed into his mind, but they vanished before they could register. "I need someone. Help. Mom." Were gathered by him. After surviving something that he was certain would have killed him, he questioned whether he would die here. So much for all that. He would now look back on this death with regret. It was unclear to him how long he had been unconscious of, whether it had been a few minutes or several days. He damned the vitality of his clan. He thought about entering and exiting consciousness once more. He no longer knew whether he was alive or dead. It would be terrible if you passed away. Right now, all he wanted to eat was ramen. He would definitely be drooling right now if he could. He chose to end his daydream as his stomach ached with pain. He knew he was still alive, at least. As soon as he lost consciousness once more, his certainty vanished. When he opened his eyes this time, he was met with one of the most exquisite sights he had ever seen. He didn't care if he died now as long as he was identified as Hinata. He would die content if he did, and he would not regret it. Even though he was in pain, he had to speak to the angel he believed to be Hinata to stop her from crying over him. He would be extremely pleased if she did. In an attempt to find his voice, he slightly raised it. He forced himself to talk, glad that he had found it. He believed that he was incapable of speaking. "Don't cry, Nada," he begged, but his voice didn't want to express the emotion. He saw the other angel and heard his name called. Look at that. Two beautiful angels. He felt himself being somewhat supported as he heard his name called. The sensation of the angel's lips against his was divine. She had such moist, soft lips. It ended much too soon. Tastes so good. He was in a state where he was unable to pinpoint what it was. It's more flavorful than ramen. Something moist and cold went into his throat, and it felt good. It was bittersweet because every time he swallowed what he thought was water, a tiny ache ran through his parched throat. "I'm so happy. Why, you're okay, and Naruto-kun." He grinned at her, pleased to see her content. Now what would become of him? Would he deteriorate here? Or had he passed away already? Naruto reasoned that he might as well take advantage of the situation. The phrase, "I want that other good-tasting stuff was used. She took a few long moments to comply. His impatience overcame him as she drew nearer, and he made himself get closer in spite of the discomfort. Her lips felt so tender and loving that he did everything in his power to regain the sensation as their lips merged once more. He tasted her lips with his tongue and wanted more. After they parted ways, Naruto could only taste her lips' sweetness and his satisfaction at the stronger flavor. Again, he licked his lips. A few sounds caught his attention, and he wondered what they might be. He attempted to assist when he felt himself being lifted, but his body felt too weak. His stomach ached once more, and he was desperate to eat at the moment. He sensed that something warm was carrying him. As he tightened his grip, he became aware that one of the angels was carrying him. He considered where they were taking him, and it was one he knew to be Konan. He was still wondering if he was dreaming, but he knew he wasn't dead yet. To die with this dream would be wonderful. He placed his cheek next to hers, and her skin felt so graciously soothing. The light he saw was growing brighter, and he heard a comment that he didn't quite hear, but it felt disapproving. He answered her as he saw the light grow brighter. As he rubbed his cheek against hers, wanting to feel more of her skin, he realized that he was still being carried by the angel and wondered what kinds of flavors she would have. He didn't receive any kind of response, but he also didn't receive any more comments. The light blinded him, so he kept his eyes closed, wondering if he was dead now. He felt himself being carried more, but he wasn't quite sure how much time he had left. Naruto thought he was lying on a bed with a blanket over his head when he felt something being put to his lips. It smelled good, so he opened his mouth and ate it, not caring what it tasted like because it was food. More time went by as he was fed slowly, enjoying the delicious taste of food. He wanted to eat more, faster, but his body wouldn't cooperate, so he was fed slowly and even had more water to drink. When he opened his eyes, he saw the angel he had seen earlier, who looked a lot like Hinata. She was holding a spoonful of some kind of bite-sized food, which he cautiously ate. As he slowly took in his surroundings, he noticed the rocky walls and ceiling. Then the other angel, who he recognized as Konan, entered, and he realized that he was not dead and that Hinata and Konan had saved him. He was relieved that he was alive and that they were safe. "How did you make it through?" Konan inquired. Naruto, who was still not feeling well, decided to say whatever was first on his mind because a lot of things were flooding his mind at once and overwhelming him. "My promises. I never go back on my word, like I said before. I'll never die until I take over as Hokage." "How are you feeling?" Konan asked the blonde boy, who was standing at the end of the bed, which was pressed up against the rocky wall, with Naruto near the edge and two people lying inside. Naruto joked tiredly, like, "I haven't had ramen for years." He was feeling very bad right now, and he had to do something about it. He looked at Konan for a moment, and she had a look of disbelief on her face, with her eyebrows raised slightly and her eyes telling him that she was confused by his response. "I really can't move without getting exhausted," he explained, supported by several pillows on his back so that he could sit up. They were still in the cave, and Hinata was sleeping soundly next to him on his left, with her arms wrapped around his left hand and arms. Even though she had almost died, she found his jokes amusing and couldn't believe he was still alive after the Kyuubi was removed from him. "How do you really feel?" Konan asked. She asked again. He didn't think he'd ever miss something like Kurama, so Naruto looked away from her amber eyes for a moment to think. "Like I'm missing a big part of me," he said lowly, and he saw Konan shake her head slightly. "Almost feel more alone than ever," he said even more quietly. Naruto looked up at her, and Konan saw eyes full of gratitude. "No, Naruto-san, you have her," she said softly, pointing to the kunoichi that lay next to him. "You have me and you have your friends back home." He thanked her, saying, "Thanks Konan. Means a lot. Did you see my Hide.8? Did he ask?" "It wasn't on you when we found you," she said, shaking her head. He glanced down at his lost, but it belonged to Iruka, and they couldn't risk going back for a single item. He would have fidgeted a little if he hadn't been nearly exhausted, and he didn't like what he had to do next, or ask. "Is there something wrong?" Sensing his uneasiness, Konan asked. It took a moment for Konan to realize that he had said he couldn't move on his own. She watched as he rubbed his chin slightly, a slight flush on his face. "Need to use the washroom," he said. "Oh. No," she thought to herself, trying to control a blush as it appeared on her face. Her response was somewhat embarrassed because she hadn't felt this way in a long time. "You need assistance, I assume," she said. He said, "Yeah, I just need help to move," while continuing to look away. He was extremely embarrassed and didn't want them to think he was some pervert. Konan helped him up, placing his right arm around her shoulders for support. He felt much weaker than he had initially thought as he fell forward, but Konan caught him before he did, which led to an unfortunate situation where his face dug into her chest. If Naruto had more energy, he would have thrown himself off her, but her cloak would have further smothered her covered breasts. She carefully assisted him in getting off and supported him once more. It was purely incidentally, was Konan's response, hoping he wasn't angry that she was trying to prevent him from hurting himself. Her face was flushed, and since her hair and skin tone matched her makeup, it was easy to spot the blush from a distance. Well, they moved outside the cave much too slowly for Naruto's comfort, and he felt much too much like a turtle when he was supposed to be running along right now. They stopped a little ways out, and he coughed more in embarrassment. Konan looked away for his privacy, hiding her blush from him as she tried to deconstruct it. Yeah, you know, Naruto agreed, thinking it was his fault. It was. So soft, he coughed, hoping to get rid of those thoughts. Pervy. Sage, why did you have to be such a pervert? Once inside, Naruto was relieved that there would be no more humiliating mishaps. He lay down on the bed he shared with Hinata, this time with support for his back, feeling worn out from the little movement he managed to make, even with assistance. How long will I be like this? He said aloud, wondering if Konan could respond. After all the damage and chakra used from fighting with the 6 paths of pain, along with the fight with Tobi and you surviving the extraction of a biju, she said, pausing briefly to catch his breath. Along with 3 days of no food or water, I'm surprised you're alive at all, she said, and Naruto only had to nod in agreement with her assessment, even though he was shocked because Naruto had essentially destroyed his body with all the punishment he had received. To answer your question, a normal individual would take more than a month. Doing nothing for months would be terrible. He remarked, it's good that I'm that awesome. He felt movement next to him as an arm and leg wrapped around his body. He turned to his left and saw Hinata beginning to wake up, her eyes opening languidly. Hey Hinata. Chan, he said. Naruto could feel her whole body tensing up, her eyes showing surprise, and a flush coming over her face, which he found endearing. Nah. Naruto.kun. She sat up in shock, but she didn't meet his gaze. He could see that she felt guilty about taking advantage of him when he thought he was going to die, and she didn't realize it was the other way around, but he didn't feel bad about it. He took her hand on her lap and clasped it with his. It's okay, Hinata. Chan, he said with a feeble smile, and she turned to face him. I'm glad it was you. He continued, referring to their first kiss. He could see joy seeping into her bashful eyes, and she blushed again as she turned away. She gave a small smile and said, I'm glad it was you too. Naruto's stomach rumbled loudly. I don't know about you girls, but I feel like I haven't eaten in days. He grinned again, but it felt like it was draining his energy. Can't talk any more, he sighed wearily, at least not in his typical manner of speaking, which involved loud talking and exaggerated gestures. I suggest we find somewhere closer to the town, Konan said, observing him slump back. He'll need to eat more fresh nutritious food and plenty of it to get back to normal. She nodded, almost forgetting Konan was present. Hi, I agree. Naruto.kun. For the first few moments, he didn't appear to respond. Quietly, he said, food first. Talk later, Konan said. I guess we should move right now. She produced a scroll with a bigger cloak inside and held it out to Hinata, saying, put it on him. The girl promptly obeyed as she snatched it up. She comforted him by saying, you don't have to move Naruto.kun. She helped him sit up, but he was limp when she attempted to put the cloak on him. He whispered, even if I wanted to. Hinata saw the terrible condition of his clothing. His Hite.8 was mission. Most of his clothes were ripped away, his pants were burned and torn up to his knees, his right sleeve on his jacket was also torn away, and the entire fabric on his back had melted. The zippers were broken, allowing the front of his jacket to be seen clearly through the fishnet shirt he was wearing, and she felt her heart pounding more quickly after she had finished covering him with the cloak. Are you interested in carrying him? Konan inquired again. Think you should Konan.san. She didn't think she could manage carrying him. Konan just nodded. She put him on her back to avoid using chakra, and she hoped that the outcomes of yesterday wouldn't be repeated. She had Hinata seal the bed before they left the now empty cave and hurried to a nearby village that led away from the hideout, where she heard Naruto trying to speak to her halfway there. He put his chin back on her left shoulder and she heard him say, Konan. Hi Naruto.san. He whispered, don't let anyone see me alive. She looked at him out of the corner of her amber eyes, seeing the plea he held within his, and he saw her questioning gaze. Everyone needs to think I'm dead. I'll explain later, he whispered again, and Konan nodded, wondering what he had planned. After a while, They stopped just outside the town, hiding from anyone who might find them, though Hinata kept wondering why, since Naruto was now safe. The town was big, with several buildings towering over the center, and it appeared to hold several thousand people. "I'll go and secure us a house outside the village." As Konan noticed that Hinata was looking perplexed, she came up to her with him on toe and said, "Naruto-san will explain later." She then left the two of them alone to conduct business inside the village, with Hinata holding him awkwardly over her back as she left the clearing with the view of the town. She sat him against a tree and made an excuse to be by his side to ensure he wouldn't fall. "Nada-chan," he called out, and Hinata closed her eyes as she listened to the quiet, low breathing of the person she loved next to her. "Nada-chan," he called out, and Hinata blushed at the memory of her nickname when they shared their kiss, her first kiss. She looked towards him, not trusting her voice. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything," he finished. They sat together in a comfortable silence as the morning sun shone over the landscape in a cloudless sky. "It's no trouble at all," she said slowly, trying not to stutter, and watched as he looked at her, his head still supported by the tree, and she lost herself in the deep ocean blue color of his eyes, observing a tiny spark of mischievousness emerge and wondering what he could possibly be doing in his current state. "Nada-chan," she said, biting her lip to keep from blushing again, and nodding to let him know that he had her full attention. "May I give you a kiss? I can't move," he whispered provocatively, and Hinata understood why he had that look because she would have to close the distance between them. She leaned forward hesitantly, keeping her eyes away from his, only looking into them when their lips were inches apart. She nodded so little that she thought he wouldn't notice. As she drew nearer, Naruto acknowledged to himself that he was being selfish. Hinata Hyuga was the young woman who had saved him twice already, once with Konan's help. He had always wondered what it would be like to be loved, and she had given him the answer. He believed that his status as a Jinchuriki would never bring him happiness, but his mother had shown him that it was possible. It was a little selfish of him to try to find happiness at this moment, as he might die from his plan, but if he was going to spend it for an indefinite amount of time, he might as well enjoy it while he was happy. The kiss was slow, but Naruto could feel the love she tried to convey through their intimate contact. He moved his lips along with hers, and it was much better than he remembered. He moved his hand to hold her warm cheek, feeling the lines of her jaw and her midnight hair. He felt his precious energy slowly draining away from him, but he didn't care. He ran his tongue slowly along her lips to try and identify the flavor he tasted before, and he felt her stiffen, but she didn't back down. He closed his eyes to savor the moment, to remember it, to burn into his memory, and never let it be forgotten. When he did, he saw Hinata's lovely blushing face. She looked shyly away from him, but he could tell she wanted more, so he licked his lips and controlled his breathing to remember the taste. "Cinnamon," he thought to himself, and he smiled slightly and rested his head on her shoulder. She tasted good, he thought, seeing her sitting tensely, playing with her fingers that were on her lap. Gathering his strength, he reached for her hand, causing her hands to freeze as he entwined it with hers and let it rest with her right hand. He could feel her relax more, so he closed his eyes to do the same. When Naruto woke up, he tried to get up right away but fell on his face before he could even get up on his knees. "Oh Kami, please give me some of that food," he pleaded as he saw Konan approaching the place where he and Hinata were sitting together. She was carrying a basket, which he assumed was the source of the smell, and she took out a rice ball from it before giving it to him. "I love you," he shouted out. Ignoring his exhaustion, he continued to lie down and quickly ate the entire rice in a few bites. "He's quite the individual." Konan stood with a controlled confusion on her face, oblivious to the reactions around him. Naruto held out another pleading hand and said, "Konan, you got to give me another one." Hinata, who already knew of his tendencies, was jealous, so he said that to her even though it meant nothing. She handed the basket of food to Hinata and helped Naruto out of his trap. After she got him up on her back and into a comfortable position, she gave him a carrot to eat. Naruto had crossed his arms around her neck to get comfortable, and he grabbed a hold of it to keep his grip. "In another minute or two, you can't eat too fast or you'll get sick," he pouted and whined from the cutoff of his food. "We should get going. I purchased a cabin not far from here," she said, ignoring his exaggerations. He bit into it and said, "At least it's orange." However, he only finished it after a few seconds, and they were already on their way. "Hey Konan." She nodded. "Thank you for saving me," he said to her, and they ran along the tree branches. She answered, "It is not at all concerning. May I inquire why?" He could already tell Hinata's motivation as he glanced at her running beside her. Konan pondered for a moment, allowing her to reminisce about the past. "It's because you saved me," she said softly, and Naruto tried not to be a little let down by her response. But also because, I believe you can bring true peace to this world, she said. She believes in me. She's really soft too, he said, smiling slightly as he put his arms around her. We're here, Konan said, feeling his stomach rumble as he noticed a small cabin, tucked away from the rest of the world and ideal for him to regain his strength. Power poles for electricity were hidden along the side. The small group entered the cabin after Konan unlocked the door, turned on the light, and looked around at what they had, which was not much. The cabin was not very big, with a small kitchen on the left side that took up a third of the space and only had a stove, refrigerator, and 2 cupboards, as well as a small table for 4. The rest of the room appeared to be a sleeping area, and there was a bathroom immediately to the right. Hinata remarked, "It's quite small." It was the only one available, Konan said, concealing her disappointment because she had assumed it would be more opulent, as evidenced by other nearby structures. The village was situated in a small valley, with several larger cabins privately set up across the hills surrounding it. Naruto said, "Well, let's eat. I'm starving." Both Kunoichi said, "Hi." Hinata then used the scroll to call forth the bed, setting it in the open space in the corner. Konan made sure Naruto was comfortable and gently placed him on the bed while they brought out the food. Naruto wanted to eat right away, but he was reprimanded by Hinata and Konan, who were probably more knowledgeable about nutrition than he was. They ate in comfortable silence, and after they were done, Konan became somewhat intrigued by Naruto's plan. He glanced at her and said, "Naruto-san, tell us about your plan." "First, you don't have to join me, although both of you will be really helpful," Naruto said, looking slightly down as he collected his thoughts. He had both Kunoichi's full attention as he looked at them. Hinata said, "I'll help you, whatever it is not, Naruto-kun." He gave her a small smile, which made her face flush a little. Hinata had promised herself that she would be by his side, and this was her chance to help someone she loved. He hadn't said it aloud, but he had shown her that he felt the same way, even though the words that followed startled her. "People will have to think I'm dead and we'll have get the other half of Kurama's chakra." Looking at the blonde teen she loved, Hinata's mind was racing with different ideas, all of which were almost pointing in the same direction. Hinata chose to express her confusion and worries by asking, "Why? Naruto-kun only had half?" she inquired. Konan guessed, to gain an advantage. Naruto nodded at her guess after she gave him a contemplative look. "Before I talk, I need to summon someone first." He extended his hand to her, and Konan understood what she was asking. She took his hand gently and produced a kunai, while Hinata looked on in fascination. Konan nicked his thumb to extract blood and made the required hand seals. A small cloud of smoke appeared and then dissipated, and a small green toad with a cloak and mohawk styled hair appeared. The toad looked angry and glared at her, oblivious to the blonde on the bed behind him. "Summoning jutsu," she said calmly, slamming her palm on the ground. "You, one of the Akatsuki, you are." Remembering the descriptions of the people involved, he yelled angrily and prepared to kill her for killing his student, the child of prophecy. Konan stood there heartlessly, waiting for Naruto to step in. Fukasaku heard the word, "geezer," "sage," and stopped his attempted charge, froze, and realized that he was the only person who had ever called him that. His senses picked up 2 other people in the room, as well as one who seemed uncannily familiar, and he turned to see him, a blonde teenager with whiskers on his cheeks. "Naruto-boy?" he asked incredulously, and the boy gave a small smile. "How are you, geezer sage?" Being alert, Fukasaku thought it might have been a ruse, but how did they call him? "What is causing the change in your chakras feel?" Remaining vigilant against any assault. Konan added, "It might be the fact that the Kyuubi was removed from him." Fukasaku pointed the finger accusingly at her. "You, avoid geezer sage." Before things became heated, he stepped in and said, "She's the one who saved my life." Fukasaku looked at him doubtfully, but he added, "I trust her," with no signs of hesitation or dishonesty in his blue eyes. Konan was a little taken aback by this and reluctantly relaxed. "How on earth did you manage to survive?" he said, "We need to tell everyone else about this." Fukasaku was perplexed, and Naruto shook his head. "Naruto-boy we nay. You can't tell anyone else that I'm alive," said he. "Everyone thinks you're dead Naru." "All right, let me explain." Fukasaku sighed and leapt onto the bed to gain a better look at Naruto as he asked. He told everyone, to explain how I survived, my mom placed a temporary seal jutsu on me that would imitate death for a bit. Fukasaku and Hinata were a little taken aback by this information, and Konan was perplexed as to how it was accomplished. Seeing their interest, he continued, "My dad put his and my mom's chakra into my seal, and she appeared to help me." "You mean, Naruto-boy?" You are aware of who your parents are? The blonde in question flashed a tiny, sincere smile as Fukasaku asked. Yeah. I do, he replied joyfully, and Hinata was pleased for Naruto because she had always wondered who his parents were. I see, but tell me why won't you allow me to tell the others, Fukasaku responded. Konan was once again taken aback by the suffix added to her name. Like what Konan-chan said, we need the advantage of enemy not knowing I'm alive, he explained. As for what I got planned, you need to trust me. Both girls pointed out that he didn't clarify that he intended to obtain the other half of the Kyuubi's chakra. They remained silent about it. Though he was a little concerned about being left out, he said, I understand Naruto. Boy. Are you sure? He said, we can tell a few people of your status. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about a few things, and shook his head, albeit grudgingly, without responding. I think Naruto-san thinks you can't risk any possible leaks, said Konan. Yeah. Sasuke is part the Akatsuki now. Naruto looked down sadly. Hinata gasped in surprise but quickly became angry, clenching her fists and struggling not to curse his name. Konan looked away. That's how he extracted it so quickly. She had heard from Tobi that he went his own way after capturing the 8 tails, a concern she was going to bring up later because all tailed beasts had been captured. As much as I want to, Naruto said. Regarding this Naruto. Boy, are you certain? Yes. He struggled to say, the people we're facing are Sharingan users, and no doubt they're going to taunt the people close me. And if they care about me at all. Then he felt a gentle, soothing hand on his, and immediately recognized it as Hinata, who gave him a comforting squeeze. They need to give their own reactions, they won't be able to fool the Sharingan if they know I'm alive, he said more confidently, adding, we can't risk anyone knowing just in case they spill it. Fukasaku remarked, I can't turn you down, Naruto. Boy. Anyway, I was wondering if you could watch over things for me. What's going on in Konoha? Inquired Naruto. You know, like a spy network. Of course, would you like to hear them now? He asked, observing him nod. Maybe later. Naruto felt his energy dwindling, as he hadn't had time to digest his meal yet. I need to rest first. I honestly don't want to hear any more bad news right now. He wanted to continue to enjoy the experience of meeting his mother and kissing Hinata, which was a little self-centered of him, but he was unable to do anything until he recovered, including talking and urinating on his own for a while. The girl next to him, a Hyuga, was able to do what the others were unable to do. I'll make sure everything is done, in exception of the toads. You have my word that nobody will know that you're alive. Fukasaku complied, saying, I understand. Konoha had been in a lot of mess since he vanished, and Fukasaku noticed that she was a Hyuga. If you need anything just summon me, he concluded, vanishing in a cloud of smoke. Finally, Naruto was relieved. All he wanted to do now was relax. He squeezed the hand that was still in his and glanced at the curious-looking Kunoichi, saying, Damn, I forgot. I'll need the help from both of you. Will you help me? He asked them. You don't have to, you don't want to. He was unable to do it without assistance. Hinata immediately responded, Of course I'll help you, Naruto-kun. I'll help however I can, she said, feeling dizzy from the smile she received. Naruto turned to face Konan, who had not yet responded, and she had a contemplative look on her face. Eyes still closed, she replied, I would like to go back to my village. I still have to return what is precious to me, quietly. She hadn't planned to stay long, until she was sure Naruto could take care of himself, but she couldn't let their dreams die either. I believe you can accomplish this without me. Your planning is well thought out, she concluded. She opened her eyes at the suffix, and Naruto saw loneliness and sadness. Since Nagato was gone, she had no one to turn to, so Naruto laughed and said, I'm not as smart as you think I am. Konan was a little taken aback, but he smiled again, saying, I hardly even did the planning. I'm not smart and too hot-headed. I just do what I think might work. But I can't plan ahead for the life of me. But you? Yes, I have Hinata-chan, but she lacks your experience. Do you recall that you saved me earlier? He concluded. Hinata said, Naruto-kun's right. You were the one who saved him. The one who got us to him. Konan noticed that the young woman's eyes were filled with gratitude. Besides, Konan heard him say as she met his cerulean eyes, which were full of fire and determination. Are we sibling students, correct? Konan could only nod. So it's only fitting that we have the same dream as Jiraiya Sensei's students, don't we? She didn't realize that she nodded in agreement, but Konan could only gaze in awe at the spark that fueled his eyes. Because we share our sensei's dream. Will he? You're one of my precious people, he concluded, his face stern and his free hand's thumb pointing to his chest. The firmness of his words, the way his voice carried his resolve, The way his beautiful eyes effortlessly conveyed his resolve, and the fact that she couldn't deny that she wanted to believe him. No, she did believe him. Precious to him. She felt a little happy at his words, and she realized she didn't necessarily believe Hinata when she had said it for him. Konan closed her eyes and felt her emotions flowing through her, a few she hadn't felt in a long time. She said, "I will help you, Naruto Uzumaki." A broad smile flashed across his whiskered face, and Konan gave it back with a smaller one. He had to accept his assessment and reasoning because she was the most experienced of them all and would not let him down. Konan would assist him in bringing about peace. A small gathering of Naruto's close friends was called in Konoha. The group was silent, lamenting the death of a friend and the disappearance of an ally. The bright sun and the carefree singing of birds contrasted with the meeting, which became even more somber upon hearing shocking news. "Hasn't everything just gone to hell?" After an unbearable silence, Kiba yelled, causing others to react. Sakura looked even worse, Ino began to cry, and others were either visibly angry or barely concealed their reaction. "Kiba, are you sure that this isn't real?" With a fierce expression on his face, Neji asked. Kiba offered a humble, "About all of them, yeah," response. This is not possible, you're lying, Kiba, screamed Sakura. After averting her accusing finger, Kiba turned to face her angrily and said, "No way," he growled, "this one is official. Naruto was killed by your goddamn lover. Boy," Kiba snarled. "No, they must have forced him," Sakura uttered. She thought as Ino sobbed more loudly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Sai added softly, "I've heard it from Danzo himself." Sakura-san. He felt an emotion he couldn't place, but he felt a regret for not killing Sasuke at the first opportunity. "He was the one who left the village in the first place," Neji remarked, "the audacity to even believe such abysmal thing." Sakura took a step back at his accusation, more tears streaming down her face, but she was unable to speak or defend his actions due to the clenching in her throat. He yelled, letting the anger get the better of him. "Stop weeping for Ino, the traitor. How the fuck did you not cry when we heard Naruto would never return?" Kiba screamed at her. His knuckles whitened with anger, and his canines drew blood from his lips as he cursed. Her sobbing stopped, but the tears continued to fall, and no one came to her defense. "That idiot," Shikamaru added tensely, his words laced with poison, "will not get away with this. I will kill Sasuke the first chance I get," Lee declared, ignoring Sakura's hurt expression. Naruto-kun was a dear friend. Shino continued, "I will join you in your endeavor, Lee." In spite of the well-known stoicism of the Aburame clan, he let his rage show in his voice. "There is no other reason other than revenge," he concluded, and everyone else, with the exception of the two kunoichi, immediately agreed. Sakura began to say, "No number let me," but was abruptly interrupted. Sakura flinched when Kiba said, "There's no way in hell we're leaving it up just to you, Sakura. Naruto was our friend too. Just because you have feelings for that traitor doesn't mean you get to have dibs," he added. Sakura turned away, feeling defeated by the sound of the others agreeing with him. Sakura was at a loss for what to do, and the denial that Sasuke had actually assisted in Naruto's capture kept coming back. "If there's anyone that has the right to kill him," a masked man said as he entered the clearing where the group was seated. "It would be the sensei who trained him," he said coldly, and Kakashi's eyes were full of malice and killing intent. "Sasuke has taken the wrong path. He'll never return," he said, and Sakura was filled with betrayal at her sensei's words, as he was her only hope of persuading the others. "I will kill him, to keep him from hurting any more others." Everyone had to nod, and Sakura had quietly vanished from the group, while Ino looked at the ground while wrapping her arms around her ankles. The one-eyed Jonin quietly left to end his hatred, and the group fell silent once more. Neji drew attention to himself by saying, "I don't understand. Why is Hinata-sama a rogue ninja?" "I'm not sure. We'll just have to wait until the bingo books get updated," said Kiba. "Let's just hope she didn't do anything reckless," Neji replied. "I am acquainted with her." Kiba, who was already aware of her feelings for Naruto, responded, "But even I don't know about that. If she finds out." Ten said, "Don't." Although he was worried that Hinata couldn't do what almost a whole village couldn't, he had to give her props to go on her own way to try and help Naruto. "I'm sure it will be fine," Kiba said unconfidently, adding that he could only hope that he was safe and sound in her arms at the moment. "We can only hope she's fine out there," he concluded. Hinata held the sleeping form of the young man she loved in her arms while she was half-seated, supported by pillows, his head nestled right under her chest, his arms thankfully held around her stomach, and she hoped and feared that he wouldn't go any higher or lower. He fell asleep quickly, and it began innocently with hand-holding, but only because he shifted in his sleep did it become more intimate, as something she could only have imagined happening in her dreams. She had managed her breathing a long time ago, but her face was permanently flushed. She felt the warmth he exuded as she cuddled closer to him. He was starting to smell a little bit like a man, which made her bite her lip in excitement, but she was grateful for the masculine scent he gave off, and when she heard him say, "Nada," her little grumble was quickly put aside as she looked lovingly at the blonde, his cheek pressed against her belly, highlighting his whiskers, and she thought, is he dreaming of me? She was completely giddy as she recalled the sensation of his warm lips, the tingle she had experienced, the way her heart soared, and she wondered if he found it as enjoyable as she did. When she heard someone coming up the porch, she snapped out of her reverie and activated her Byakugan, but she relaxed when Konan came in. She looked at her for a moment and said, "We'll probably be here for a few weeks at most. Could you help me move the bed against the corner?" Hinata nodded and reluctantly pulled away from Naruto's embrace, but she was grateful because she was getting hot in her cloak, which she was still wearing. She moved from the left side of the bed to join Konan, and the two of them pushed the bed with Naruto still on it. Konan quickly retreated and used a scroll to call forth a small bed, placing it next to the other bed with enough room between them. "Konan-chan, where am I going to sleep?" Hinata asked as she undressed, and Konan hesitated briefly at the extra suffix. She was making her bed with her back to her. "I assumed that you would sleep in the same bed as him. You had no problems with it yesterday," Konan replied with a smile. "What?" The two beds easily occupied the majority of the living room, which was essentially half the house, as Hinata glanced around the tiny cabin they were in and muttered, I mean oh, of course. The amber-eyed Kunoichi suggested, "I've gotten my needs. Perhaps you should do the same." Hinata gave her a questioning look and said, "We should be here for a while until Naruto-kun recovers." She was given a sizable quantity of ryo, and she took another sealing scroll. "I've already obtained some clothes for him," she said, setting it down on the small table between the kitchen and living room. "Of course," Hinata said, putting the money in her pocket. She had been running and perspiring for the last 4 days without taking a shower, so she thought she would buy herself something comfortable to sleep in instead of the clothes she had been wearing. "Konan-chan." Nothing could make up for what she had done, so she bowed as the person turned to face her and said, "I want to thank you so much for saving him. You should not have given me all the credit, Hinata-san. I would have most likely never have made it on time if weren't for you." Hinata was staring at her. According to Konan, but Naruto-kun would still, she shook her head. Her eyes would not accept no when she said, "It was a collaborative effort, Hinata-san. Your Kekkei Genkai was a large factor in why we were able to avoid the Konoha shinobi. I might have made it, but I would have been late by a day or so," she said, turning to face the blonde, who was soundly sleeping. Naruto-kun would have died by dehydration by then, she concluded. Hinata turned to face Naruto's sleeping form. "Thank you," she murmured. The girl thanked him and departed, saying, "I'll watch over him while you're gone." With a sigh, Konan headed for the restroom. Naruto felt pressure build up, and his eyes popped open. He knocked off the blankets covering him and made a hasty attempt to get to his feet. But when he attempted to stand up, his legs failed him completely. His arms were unable to move quickly enough to stop his descent, so his body struck the wood floor hard and landed on his chin. In his frail state, the pain echoed through his body. "Kami, it hurts so much," I said as the agony persisted. "Naruto-kun," he exclaimed as he heard a door slam. Because of the honorific, he initially believed it to be Hinata, but the voice wasn't the quiet, soft-spoken girl. The confidence in this one was immense. The pain was forgotten as he looked up and gaped at what he saw. Wearing only a blue bra and dark blue leggings, Naruto was unable to resist exploring Konan's sparsely clad body. Her face was devoid of eyeshadow, showcasing her stunning amber eyes, and her hair was damp and disheveled. His mouth moved in an attempt to form words, but he paid no attention to what he said. His gaze wandered down to marvel at the bountiful piles she held, which were always concealed by a cloak. As his gaze wandered further, he noticed that her toned stomach had water droplets streaming down her luscious pale skin, and that her navel was pierced with 4 surrounding ones. He looked up at her again after realizing what he was doing. He could swear he saw gratitude in her eyes, but her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment. He stammered, I needed t.t.top. As he turned his gaze away from her, Naruto sensed a change in himself. He was embarrassed, and his face flushed. He coughed and attempted to stand up, but he was unable to support himself. "Oh, Kami, I just checked her out. I hope she doesn't think I'm a pervert." While attempting to prevent a particular part of his anatomy from continuing to grow, he remained down in shame. He kept thinking about her half-naked body, so he started lightly hitting his head on the ground. He could feel soft, feminine hands picking him up. He avoided looking into her eyes when he looked up and saw that it was Konan, who was wearing a T-shirt but still blushed in embarrassment. "I'm sorry," was his apology. As they are being carried to the restroom, "She smells really good." "Really good," he said, but he was forced to wake up by the pressure he had forgotten about. She answered, There's nothing to apologize for." Konan averted his gaze as he went about his business. "He evokes a wide range of emotions in me," she pondered. A loud thump and groan came from the other room as she was getting dressed. She walked straight into the room, filled with worry. She searched the house for any indications of danger. She noticed Naruto's blue eyes staring into hers as she turned to face him. "You truly are an angel," she remembered him saying. As his eyes began to move downward, she was taken aback by the unexpected compliment and, for some reason, allowed him to keep staring at her with passion. She was embarrassed that this had made her feel so flattered. She carried him back to his bed after he washed his hands and finished his business. In an attempt to eliminate the awkward situation, he inquired, "Where's Hinata Chan?" She was grateful. She answered, "In the village gathering personal supplies." As she made her way back to her bed, she said, "She'll be back soon." She went to her gear after remembering something she had left on it. With her back to him, he inquired, "Oh, how long was I out?" She discovered her tool pouch concealed beneath the red cloak. She pulled out a green book called The Tale of an Utterly Gutsy Shinobi, and said, "About 2 hours," until she could properly return it. She kept it with her, which was right now. The statement, "I don't think I'll be able to sleep in for a while," alludes to their previous situation. She turned to face him, nodding, but ignoring it. "Is that?" he whispered, his eyes widening at the book he saw. She answered, "Yes, it's Jiraiya Sensei's novel." Naruto accepted the book from her with gentle hands. He carefully studied the book's cover for a moment. She went on, "I picked it up when Tobi attacked us." He raised his head again and gave her a gentle look. "Thank you," he said quietly. His sincere appreciation caused Konan to feel a surge of warmth within her, adding, "Konan Chan," a grin on his face. Konan smiled back at him, unconcerned by the honorific. She closed her eyes and said, "Naruto-kun, we're sibling students." In fact, she preferred the honorific. She concluded by saying, "We're supposed to fulfill our sensei's wishes." Day 3. "How is she doing?" inquired Sakura. Though she already knew the answer to her question, she allowed hope to germinate a little. Tsunade, one of the fabled Sannin, was still in a coma. Another of the Slug Princess's apprentices, Shizune, knelt over her. The older woman said glumly, "There has been no improvement since yesterday." Sakura sighed in disappointment. "Wake up," Sakura thought to herself, "we all need you." After protecting the populace from Pain's devastating jutsu, the Slug Princess had gone into a coma. Both apprentices were waiting for their Hokage and Sensei to wake up from their sleep in a big tent. Sakura questioned, What are we supposed to say to her?" Shizune looked up at the pink-haired Kunoichi and rearranged the loose blankets. The question hinted at something she already knew. The Akatsuki killed the loud, spiky-haired blonde. He was regarded as family by both Tsunade and Shizune. The older woman thought, "I guess that cursed necklace finally came around." She responded, "I don't know. But Tsunade-sama won't take it well." Shizune believed that she would continue to serve the village because he was the reason she came back in the first place. The reason she now carries the will of fire. She simply had no idea how Naruto's passing would impact her. She witnessed the girl glaring down at her sensei in agony. "Get better, Tsunade-sama," Kunoichi, who had pink hair, said as she got to her feet. In order to help any shinobi or civilians who were hurt, Sakura gave it her all at every opportunity. In the hopes that Tsunade's condition would improve, she would check on her 3 times a day. She had fallen asleep quickly every day since the attack because she didn't want to be reminded of the terrible news. As she exited the tent to bid Shizune farewell, she noticed the sun descending over Konohagakure. She hurried back to her tent because she didn't want to hear any more condolences from the shinobi or the villagers. She traveled to the tents where the shinobi slept, passing through several finished streets in a worn-out state. The fact that one of her teammates had passed away and that the person she loved was to blame was something she didn't want to face. She wanted to think that he was still out there, slowly but surely making his way back home, rather than that he was gone. However, it has been nearly a week since. She recalled that the Jinchuriki would have died after the extraction of the Biju, which would have taken 3 days to finish. She didn't want sympathy since it would imply his death. This implied that Sasuke was involved in his death. A loud shout came from behind her. There's no way Naruto. Nisan is dead, it was said. She saw a boy she knew as Konohamaru when she turned away. He seemed to be arguing with a Jonin wearing sunglasses and a black bandana. Others turned to observe the nature of the outburst. The Jonin argued, "You need to face the facts, Konohamaru." With some tears in his eyes, he cried out, "No way. He's a hero. Heroes aren't supposed to die. He just can't. I won't." He stammered out the last few words. The Jonin paused to look down. The Jonin lowered himself to the boy's level and placed a hand on his shoulder, saying, "He was a hero. He gave his life protecting the village. That is worthy of a Hokage." Sakura couldn't bring herself to leave as she gazed sorrowfully at Konohamaru's tears. "He won't be forgotten, Konohamaru. No true ninja of Konoha would ever allow it," he said with determination. Tears soaked the dirt as the boy gazed down at the ground. "Because of that, he'll be a legend. Who's supposed to be my rival now?" The boy with the scarf said pitifully to himself. Sakura turned away, unable to bear to watch any longer, and went on. She was so exhausted that she didn't even notice her surroundings. Somehow, her feet carried her to the tent. Sakura gathered herself quickly and collapsed onto her mattress, her eyes feeling heavy. Before falling asleep, she muttered, "There's just no way he could be." Naruto observed Konan turning on the shower. He allowed the warm water to splash over his body and hair, washing away all the filth and grime that had accumulated over the previous few days. Being in yet another awkward situation with her, he let out another sigh. While he shielded himself from her, he was completely nude in the bathtub. Fortunately, he was able to remove his boxers without assistance, so she didn't have to do it. He had the sudden realization that he was indeed naked in a bathtub with a stunning woman close by. He remarked, "I didn't think everything would start this awkwardly." To be honest, Naruto assumed that by now they would be traveling, remaining hidden, defeating villains, and saving princesses. But he had no idea why or how they would be saving princesses. "Well," Konan continued, "you could hardly move." Even so, she found it hard to believe. This was the kind of work she believed Hinata could do. However, Hinata appeared to be almost unable to complete these tasks without passing out. She had stated that she wasn't ready to deal with these. Her words came back to Konan's mind. Flashback. Hinata admitted, I can't do it." For a moment, Konan stared at her in shock. The kunoichi's pale eyes gave Konan the impression that she was going to faint. She could practically hear her heartbeat threatening to explode from her as she teetered from side to side and took deep breaths to steady herself. "You can't?" she asked, her brows furrowing in shock. At her question, the girl gave a quick nod. Naruto was waiting for them inside the cabin they had acquired, and they were standing just outside. With trepidation, Hinata exclaimed, I'm not ready." Anxiously, she fiddled with hands on her lap. "I almost hurt him the last time I tried," Hinata said, glancing briefly at Konan before turning her head away. She waited for her to continue, but Konan wondered how that could possibly be possible. She left it up in the air, but Konan could see why she was fainting. I faint when he. That explains things," she begged, "please don't judge me." Konan turned to face the kunoichi, who, to her right, discovered something more intriguing. Which, to put it mildly, was nothing. "She is extremely timid," Konan said, criticizing her. It implied that she would have to attend to some of his necessities. A slight flush came over her cheeks. She might hurt him more in his current state if she's telling the truth. As the kunoichi grudgingly nodded, Konan sighed and said, "Are you sure, Hinata-san?" Even though it wasn't very important, she was somewhat impressed by how far she would go to keep him safe, even from herself. Weakly, she said, I wouldn't be able to help." Knowing that she would need to assist him in taking a bath, Konan could see some jealousy in those white eyes. "I don't want to hurt him." "I understand." Finished, she promptly plugged the drain and started running the bath for him after he had finished rinsing. As she waited for it to be almost full, she said, "I'm actually helping him bathe." Following the blonde's satisfaction, she promptly switched it off and moved back to sit on a chair behind a little barrier she had constructed out of her paper jutsu. She continued to wait in the tiny bathroom in case he needed assistance or if he accidentally drowned. Mostly, she hoped he didn't require it. Wait. Mostly why? She was startled out of her reverie and asked, "Hey Konan-chan?" "Why?" "Yes." A little heat shot up her cheeks. He inquired, "Did you ever read Pervy Sage's book?" "I haven't," was her response. She prayed that he wouldn't notice her stutter, which she didn't think she could accomplish. He exclaimed, "What? But you're one of Pervy Sage's students." He sounded so surprised that Konan was a little confused. She was not given the opportunity to answer his charge. "That won't do at all." she said as she heard water splashing, as if he was trying to stand up, but it eventually stopped. He said sadly, "Oh right, I can't move without help." At his antics, Konan shook her head and smiled slightly. She released a breath that she was unaware she had been holding. "Why?" she inquired. He couldn't have finished so quickly. He said, "I wanted to get that book." Upon hearing his entreaty, Konan rose silently and left the restroom. The scent of whatever it was Hinata was cooking welcomed her. She had her back to Konan, concentrating on cooking, and she hastily picked up the book that was resting on the tiny kitchen table. When Naruto asked her where she had gone, she returned and went to sit down. "I went to fetch your book," was her response to his question. She took a seat behind the wall, separating them in the chair. She brightened and said, "Great, you should read it." Then she asked him a question. She glanced at the book in her hands and asked, "Are you sure?" He said, "I'm sure you know." Her heart skipped a beat when she said, "In fact, I want you to read it." He would smile broadly, and she could almost see it. She wanted to read the book too, so she couldn't turn him down. She discovered that Nagato was, in fact, a partial inspiration for the book. "Thank you Naruto-kun," was her expression of gratitude. She looked at the cover for a moment. Before carefully turning the book's first page, she became so engrossed in the book that she started turning the pages. He interrupted her after an indeterminate period of time. Then he called out, "Konan-chan?" She responded after being distracted from her focus. "Yes?" she asked, shutting the book she had been given. "I'm done." She moved the little partition separating them and placed the book on the sink. He was surprisingly mostly wearing the orange shorts she had purchased for him. Despite the fact that he had no shirt on, Konan found herself glancing at his slender chest muscles. Her cheeks began to flush, and she turned away from him. His wet hair hung over his eyes as he reached for a shirt that was out of reach, but fortunately she was not caught. She snatched it up off the ground and gave it to him. As she dissected the heat on her face, she looked away. "Thank you," he exclaimed with joy. He struggled to put it on and fumbled. When he eventually finished getting dressed, he exclaimed, "Wow, I actually had to catch my breath." To assist him in walking, Konan leaned slightly. As they left the restroom, she gave them a gentle reprimand, saying, "Your body is recovering, so you shouldn't push yourself." He drooled a little and exclaimed, "Whoa, this smells awesome Hinata-chan." Konan turned her gaze away from him to focus on the hyuga. Rice, fish, chicken, curry, and vegetables were among the many dishes she had arranged on the tiny table. As she finished setting the table, said person looked up and blushed deeply at the compliments she received. He was assisted by Konan to take a seat close to the knee-high table. He was bouncing, and Konan could see that he was impatiently waiting for her and Hinata to sit down. Everybody was seated on one of the small table's three ends. He exclaimed, "Itadakimasu," with such vigor that Konan and Hinata imitated. He promptly started eating and promptly piled his own plate with his portions. Konan observed the positive vibe he created in the space. He devoured the food with gusto, and his demeanor and the cheerful atmosphere made her smile a little. As he did so, Konan noticed Hinata grinning proudly. Konan gave him a drink to help him push down the food after he began gently pounding his chest to do so. Phew! As he put his drink down, he laughed with both eyes closed and grinned broadly. "Whoops, I ate too much, thanks Konan-chan." His smile. Konan said, feeling her cheeks get a little hot and her heart flutter. "Wow Hinata-chan, you're a fantastic cook." This made the other kunoichi blush, though more shyly because she was unable to meet his eyes. Ignorant of the impact he had on them, he promptly went back to feasting on his food. Konan bounced back fast and resumed eating. In contrast to the rushed and quiet meal she had with Hinata before they arrived at him, she observed how much livelier it was to eat with him. Curious, Konan noticed that she was permanently flushed from his previous remark. Surprisingly, Konan relaxed in his company and felt comfortable. She believed that she would never experience this emotion again. Day 4. Naruto gazed at the beauty with the midnight hair that was fastened to him. He didn't mind that he had woken up next to her the day before, even though it surprised him. For him, waking up next to someone who loved him was a completely different experience. He pondered what it was that made her fall in love with him. "She has risked her life twice to save me, so I can't deny it." She pressed herself against him on his side, threw her legs across his, and placed her left arm across his chest. "She's very tender, particularly on the chest." He shook his head in a futile attempt to get his mind off it, but it kept coming back. Hinata had her hair in a wild mess and was dressed modestly in a lavender nightgown that hid her small frame. It was clear to Naruto that she had well-endowed breasts. "I'm definitely not a pervert." He considered the course of action he needed to take. However, without knowing where to find the information, he was unable to travel very far. Damn, I'm terrible at this. He woke up quite early, and since neither kunoichi was working, it was the first time he had been up before them. They were both clearly dressed comfortably. To his right, he noticed Konan removing blankets from her body. He saw what she was wearing right away. She wore a loose tank top that exposed her stomach and pajama shorts that flaunted her legs and thighs. He gazed at her once more, admiring her luscious skin and pale, creamy legs. He felt embarrassed that he was examining two kunoichi while they were asleep, and he turned away as an excruciating heat surged through his cheeks. He resumed his planning, but it was ineffective after realizing, "Oh Cammy, I'm going to be with two beautiful women for a while." He moaned, but his hormones rejoiced. As he considered other things, he managed his response. The warm, cozy sensation of Naruto lying beside her roused Hinata from her slumber. She buried her face in his chest and let out a contented sigh, intending to keep this sensation going for a few more minutes before she woke up. The fact that she could wake up beside him and hold him in her arms made her very happy. She felt herself smile broadly at her happiness, even though she thought it would be so unlikely that she would be able to accomplish this. She discovered that having him right next to her made it difficult for her to sleep. She wouldn't fall asleep until she couldn't bear to keep her eyes open any longer. Fortunately, Naruto slept longer than she did, so she didn't feel exhausted. As a result of getting enough sleep, she was able to wake up before he did. She couldn't deny that she took advantage of his extended slumber by staying in bed longer or cuddling with him more. Before being cut off, she hummed a song. Naruto said, "Oh good, so you're awake then?" Hinata let out a startled squeak at the unexpected interruption. A blush of embarrassment crept up on her, and she felt her limbs freeze. He inquired inquisitively, "Did you awake just a few minutes ago?" Her heart raced at the thought of being discovered. Yes, was her timid response to him. With his arms folded behind his neck, he gazed back at her as she timidly raised her head from his chest. The intensity of his ocean blue pools was too intense for her, so she turned away. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw his broad smile. To keep herself under control, Hinata tipped her head away and said, "I wanted to talk, that's all. I was getting bored, that's all, you know." Naruto didn't try to move her, and she didn't pull away from his chest. The words, about W. What, came out of her throat. The fact that she was wanted there made her silently happy. "I've just been thinking about how you and Konan teamed up." Oh, she recalled that she hadn't really told him what had caused the incident. She grinned, hoping the village would help him. She tried her hardest to recount the events without stuttering, but it was in vain. When she described what the village and their friends attempted to do, she glanced up at his shocked expression. He sat up, and Hinata followed suit, feeling a little let down that she was unable to maintain her posture. Hinata nodded in agreement, a little dejected that he was so taken aback that he had saved the entire village. "You mean, they all tried to look for me?" he asked. She saw him looking into her, searching for any hint of dishonesty. Think, they were going to cheer for you if you came back. To demonstrate that she wasn't lying to him, she maintained eye contact. Another moment later, he smiled, a little sad. "Just for me, wow," he said, thankful that he didn't comment on her stuttering. Hinata continued her story after another quiet moment. Hinata was confused when he discovered how she had teamed up with Konan, but he did nothing to stop her. She went back to talking about the days of traveling with her. He remarked that they sounded like Sai when they first met, referring to their confrontation with the Anbu and their emotionless behavior. She described to him how they had gotten away while killing a dog. Hinata glanced at him anxiously after noticing his sorrowful downward glance. He glanced at her and grinned a little. If I didn't already know the reason why you'd go so far for me," he said, "I'd call you crazy," was his hint at her confession, and Hinata felt her face flush as he hugged her. In Training Ground 3, a single person stood with a cup of liquid in one hand. The person was a one-eyed Jonin. Kakashi let the hot liquid run down his throat and gulped down the sake cup all at once. He embraced the feeling wholeheartedly. Reaching for the jug on top of the stump to pour more for himself, he sighed. He sipped his cup slowly while leaning against the center of the three stumps. When his name was called out to him, the one-eyed Jonin either ignored it or didn't care. He didn't even know who it was until the person standing next to him did. He turned to face the field and asked, "Is there anything you need, Tenzo?" He saw a vision of Naruto running frantically in his direction. Ignoring his other codename, Yamato asked, "You think it's a good idea trying to drink right now? Especially alone and trying to reminisce?" He asked, gazing around the field with a nostalgic gleam in his eye. He glanced at Yamato and nodded in comprehension, saying, "Well Tenzo, there isn't any good news." He took another sip of his sake and said, "So might as well lose myself in a better time for a bit." Yamato retorted, "The past will only get worse in due time." There was a reason why ninjas disliked discussing their pasts. Doing so would only make them feel regret, rage, and sadness. Although Kakashi had to concur with this assertion, he was determined to continue. He took out a second cup, filled it with the liquid, and gave it to Yamato, who gave it a quick glance. Yamato took the cup and refused to leave him alone, saying, "Let's drink and I'll tell you the legend of Naruto Uzumaki." "Loli," he remarked, "has a sad ending though." Yamato inquired, "So this where your team passed?" Ignoring his last statement, he gestured toward the field. They dug into what they knew about Naruto and reminisced about the knucklehead they had taught. Time went by, but neither of them was totally sure how much they only knew from the setting sun. Yamato laughed and said, "No way. He just jumped in that ice dome." Due to their alcohol consumption, they were both inebriated. "Yeah," laughed Kakashi. He continued to laugh, and Yamato joined in, saying, "Just moments before I said he was the most unpredictable hyperactive knucklehead ninja." To the others, they brought out another full jug of sake to drink for themselves, and the reminiscences turned to past events in a depressing atmosphere. He laughed, and Kakashi gave him a questioning glance. Yamato laughed again and said, "It's just I heard something earlier from the other Anbu." Kakashi waited for him to continue, listening carefully. His laughter was echoed by Kakashi, who said, "I heard that right before he fought Pain," he said to Tsunade. "Sama, go back and sip some tea, Granny, can you believe that?" He continued to laugh. "It's not too hard to believe, I mean, he did call Jiraiya Sama, Arrow. Senin." Kakashi laughed again, and Yamato started laughing too. "He's definitely surpassed the people who taught him. I actually died against Pain." Yamato looked over at him in surprise as the laughter subsided and the two began to reminisce about earlier events. He was aware that a lot of people had been killed, but himself included. Yamato stumbled out, "What?" Kakashi simply gave a sullen nod. He shook his head as he took another sip from his cup. "I went up against two of them with backup too." Kakashi chuckled, "Then he wins. Alone. He amazes me with his progress. He's Naruto Uzumaki, hero of Konohagakure." Yamato raised his glass in toast, and Kakashi finished it and drank the remaining contents of their cups. Kakashi sighed piteously, "It's a fool's hope, but part of me hopes he's somehow still alive." He went on, "Even if there's no way he should be." Yamato glanced at his friend's condition as he gazed up at the fading sky. He never did become Hokage. Day 5 Naruto exclaimed, "Oh thank Kami," with relief and contentment. He was standing here, urinating over a toilet bowl. The satisfaction came not only from the decreasing pressure but also from the fact that he could now, sort of, do it alone. He needed a cane that Konan had purchased for him because he was unable to walk without assistance. He hurriedly cleaned his hands before leaving the restroom. While Konan sat at the table reading Jiraiya's book, he discovered Hinata in the kitchen once more making breakfast. He lay on his bed and lied down. Konan remarked, "Your body heals remarkably fast." As she said it, she didn't raise her head from her book. Naruto stretched out on the mattress and gazed up at the ceiling. He raised his right arm in the air and gave a thumbs up. He declared, "That's because I'm awesome." Before actually responding to her, he let out a satisfied sigh. He turned to face her and replied, "My mom told me that Uzumakis have really good life forces, so we live long lives, and some heal faster." He noticed Hinata and Konan paying close attention. "Kurama actually significantly increases his healing factor," he recalled his mother saying. "That food smells great, Hinata-chan," he exclaimed as he took a deep whiff of the food that was cooking, feeling his stomach rumble and his mouth water. The two kunoichi with blue hair went back to work. Eager to eat again, he turned his attention back to the ceiling. Hinata-chan's food is so good, he got to eat a lot, even if it wasn't ramen. Naruto found the food to be tasty despite having to eat vegetables. Konan explained that the abundance of food Hinata prepared would aid in his recuperation, and they eagerly consumed it. He was beginning to feel a little restless, even though he had enjoyed the previous few days, such as waking up next to Hinata or discussing the book with Konan. To receive training and obtain the remaining chakra of Kurama, he had to get back on his feet. He was going to challenge himself to fulfill his promise to Kurama as soon as he recovered. "I appreciate Konan and Hinata being here, Kami. I hope they can help me with what I need to know." Hinata's announcement of how breakfast was finished startled him, and he hastily set his thoughts aside as he made his way to the table. Konan stood on the roof of the cabin she had purchased. She could feel the cool night air blowing through the forest, uprooting the leaves of the numerous trees in the area. The landscape became dimly visible as the full moon shone brightly in the sky. From the town, she could see the many lights that lighted up the sky. She awoke slightly as she inhaled deeply and felt the chilling air fill her lungs. She enjoyed the quiet that surrounded her and the pleasant air of late September. She had to consider her situation. She sat down on the roof after taking another deep breath. Wearing the red cloak, she became more at ease. 5 days had passed since they had saved Naruto. She had visited the town earlier today and, somewhat surprisingly, had heard about Konoha's hero. Apparently, news of Naruto's disappearance reached important towns in the Hai no Kuni, Land of Fire. Additionally, they issued a warning regarding a Hyuga that was now collaborating with the Akatsuki. What plans does Naruto-kun have? She was still unsure of what it was. She pondered the mystery that was Naruto Uzumaki. She found herself grinning at it, saying, "He is odd." She undoubtedly experienced feelings that she believed she had shed, including shame and embarrassment, among others. He defeated the 6 paths of pain, but she would have questioned his ability given his almost carefree demeanor and tendency to joke around almost every opportunity. I suppose it's a feature of his charm. She pictured the smile she received during dinner, and her cheeks turned a pale shade of pink. How does he make my heart skip a beat? Day 6, the Hyuga genius exclaimed. I can't believe this. He was staring at the bingo book with his fists clenched. He didn't know for sure until they were together, but he had gathered up Shino and Kiba to deliver the news. He slammed the book onto the table so they could read it together. Kiba roared. There's just no way Hinata would attack a fellow ninja. He got up quickly and paced around thoughtfully. While he watched his master kick a rock in frustration, Akamaru complained about the news. No way. She had got to be under a genjutsu, he shouted. Even though he was also in disbelief, Shino reasoned, she has the Byakugan Kiba, it couldn't be a possibility. For treason of working for the Akatsuki, attacking Konoha shinobi, killing a dog, and desertion, Hinata was now listed in Konoha's bingo book. Neji retorted, then why would she do this? He didn't want to consider what Hiyashi would do if he learned of this. She did something entirely reckless. The stunt she had pulled had already left him feeling incredibly let down. Naruto. She completed all of this for you. All these Akatsuki are freaks. He shouted at them respectively. She's smarter than that, so she couldn't have done this. He started pacing nervously again. His breathing became more rapid, so he brought his hand to his mouth to bite down in order to calm himself. If there is a guy who could be immortal, then they could do a genjutsu that powerful, he said. Neji nodded and hoped that this was the only way that Shino could refute his argument. Shino continued, we'll have to hope that she returns unharmed. Being completely clueless about her whereabouts made it impossible for them to follow her. Kiba sagged on the chair in defeat and said, or hope that one of our friends finds her before Hunter.nin do. Not only did his biggest rival vanish, but now one of his teammates did too. Kiba believed in her abilities, but he didn't think she could manage herself against a group of highly skilled Jonin Hunter.ninja. It could only be described as troublesome. Waiting for Naruto to arrive to eat, Hinata and Konan sat at the table. Using a cane, he moved slowly across the living room while both Kunoichi watched. He walked slowly and held the cane in both hands like an old man, exaggerating his face to appear older and more worn out than he actually was. Damn kids taking all my ramen, he said, mimicking his voice to sound elderly. She was relieved that Naruto was still the same person on the inside, and she laughed with laughter. The desire to kiss him and taste his lips returned to her. Since they hadn't shared a kiss since they arrived here, she also fought the urge. I assume you enjoy ramen then? Konan inquired. When Hinata looked at her, a tiny smile appeared on her face. She never really smiled wider than that, Hinata noticed. She remarked that she was composed, stoic, and extremely serious during their trip together. I wonder if she was like that all the time. They didn't talk much during their successful rescue mission, and Naruto learned more from her in fewer exchanges than she had in the days they spent together. Yup. He said with a broad smile. He said to them, so when the heck could I have some ramen? She answered, W. When you're all be. Better Naruto-kun, and Konan gave a nod of agreement. He pouted dejectedly, and she saw tears welling in his eyes. He sobbed in exasperation, I haven't had ramen in a long time, you know. Hinata continued to laugh. She certainly did like having more time with him in this manner. He recovered rapidly and sat down to sit down, grinning broadly at them both. With haste, he grabbed the cutlery and exclaimed, Itadakimasu. Itadakimasu, was said by both Kunoichi, who then joined Naruto in his meal. They ate in silence, picking their portions for themselves. Hinata pondered their precise strategy as she consumed her meal. Will it be risky? She pondered. Her current partners were both skilled shinobi in their own right. She didn't think she could match them after seeing them both in action, and she felt her incapacity before Naruto grinned at her. No. I never break my word. After remembering the kiss she and Naruto had shared, she resolved to not be a burden to them. I promised that I would help him, she said to herself. It's cold, Gaara said as she made her way through the snow-covered trail in the land of iron. They were so close to their destination now that they had left 3 days ago for the 5-cage summit. The only reason it took so long was that they had taken their time. The Godem Kage was once a Shukaku Ichibi Jinchuriki. He should have perished, but he was saved by a close friend. Being happy to have someone like Naruto as his first friend made Gaara feel proud. Kankuro exclaimed, "Damn it, why'd they have to have such a cold place to hold a meeting?" More expletives were hurled at the wind by the puppet user. Tamari continued, Shut up Kankuro, you don't need to remind us. It was clear that she was in more pain than the other two. The clothing she was wearing wasn't designed for cold weather, and her arms and thighs were exposed. Given that Kankuro was completely covered, she couldn't understand why he was complaining, as both of her brothers at least wore clothing that covered them. As they proceeded toward their destination, the sandy blonde made an effort to ignore the chilly breeze. Gaara went on, "We're close by." As they ascended the hill, they noticed a sizable building. He could not bring himself to chatter his teeth. As he continued to walk, he could feel the snow crunching beneath his feet and see his breath as the warmer air met the colder air. As another chilling breeze rolled past the sand siblings, snow began to fall from the sky. I hate the cold, Gaara thought. It was much colder than a desert night, so Gaara wore his cage hat and kept his face down to shield himself from the icy wind that continued to punish them. For people accustomed to the extreme heat that the desert offered during the day, it was the worst place to put them. As they got closer, they learned that the 5-cage summit was taking place there. A big gate was guarded by 2 samurai, and shortly after they had closed the gap, a third samurai with bandages on his head joined them. The older man bowed respectfully and said, "Good afternoon, Kage. I am Mifune, your host of the meeting between the 5-cage. He held out his hand, which Gaara reluctantly accepted out of respect. He gave his hand a single shake before dropping it. "My name is Gaara, Kazakage of Sanagakure." The man who went by Mifune grinned and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you too." "Your guards must be itching to enter," Gaara said, turning to face his siblings. Gaara noticed that Kankuro was trembling in place and breathing in shudders. With the exception of her jaw visibly shaking against her will, Tamari appeared to be completely normal and unaffected by the cold. Another chilly wind blew through, and Gaara couldn't blame them. "Fucking cold," he swore. "Should we go on inside?" Gaara inquired. He's also eager to warm his limbs by going inside. With a nod, the man said to follow. Before they even entered a sizable building, they had to pass through a number of gates and walls. The 3 of them appreciated the warmth the building offered, though Gaara did so inconspicuously. They proceeded through a spacious room that was held up by many large pillars. "What of the other cages?" "Since you have arrived, we are now waiting for the Hokage to join us," he responded. Gaara acknowledged with a nod. They went through a number of more hallways and stairways before arriving at the location of the meeting, but no more words were exchanged. He turned to face them and paused in front of the door. He gestured to a door a few meters to the right, saying, "Your personal guards will have to go to the upper balcony overlooking the meeting." Gaara nodded and told his siblings to do as they were told. "I'll wait for the Hokage," he said, and he left. As soon as he entered, he noticed a big U-shaped table that could accommodate the 5 ninja village leaders. He went straight to his designated seat, which was marked by a big flag behind the chair, after 3 other Kageza, the Tsuchikage Onoki, the Mizukage Mei, and the Reikage Ah sat down. He sat down quietly while the others engaged in small talk. Gaara mentioned that he would take a seat between the Hokage and the Mizukage. This made him wonder if Naruto was doing okay because the Akatsuki was involved in the meeting. When Mifune returned, he didn't have to wait long, but he was taken aback that it wasn't Tsunade. Rather, it was a man in a bandage who sat down right away. What might have become of the former Hokage? The start of the meeting cut him off in the middle of his thoughts. Gaara exclaimed in shock, "What?" He could barely feel his fist coil. He fixed his gaze on the Hokage, who introduced himself as Danzo. He asked, "What are you saying?" Gaara looked at him and felt his fist protest at the strain. "Exactly what I said, Kage," he said. He retreated. "Because of the foolish actions of the Hokage before me. They had captured our Jinchuriki host more than a week ago, and I can only assume they fully extracted the Kyuubi from him." He was in a state of disbelief, but he was filled with absolute rage. They were unable to. He questioned, "Are you sure? Why wasn't I informed?" "I don't have to repeat myself a third time, or I would seriously doubt your ability to listen," the man opened fire on him. The old man's description of Naruto made Gaara's teeth clench. We were severely weakened from the Akatsuki attack, as such we had to focus on returning the Kyuubi. The Raikage screamed, "Are you telling me that the Akatsuki had already captured all the Biju?" He refrained from hitting the desk with another fist. Mei Terumi went on, "What are they planning with the Biju?" She was a little apprehensive about fighting against the combined strength of all the Biju. They were employed as a deterrent to war for a reason. An entire village could be destroyed by just one of them. Whatever the Akatsuki are planning with them, it means that we must put a stop to them, Danzo stated. Right as I recalled earlier, I believe that the Hokage should. Ao leapt down from the upper balcony and pointed an accusing finger at the person wearing the bandages, saying, "Stop. Hokage, let me see the eye beneath those bandages." As they watched in confusion, other ninja leapt down below to defend their respective cages. The cages requested an explanation for interfering with a significant announcement. "I believe that the Hokage is casting a genjutsu on Mifune with the implanted eye from Shisui Uchiha. A jutsu so powerful that you wouldn't even notice that you were being controlled," he said. As the Hokage sat in silence, worried voices sounded throughout the room. "My Byakugan eye saw the illusion placed on the fourth Mizukage." "You deceptive old bastard!" exclaimed the Raikage, startled, prior to the possibility of further accusations being made. Gaara glanced at the pale white figure that emerged from the center of the room, appearing to be covered in some kind of flytrap. The individual turned to face the 5 cage huddled together and exclaimed, "Sasuke is here. Where is he? Where is he, I wonder?" He overheard the Tsuchikage remark that he might be an Akatsuki member. "Sasuke has arrived. Is he collaborating with the Akatsuki, then?" Prior to hearing the snapping sound of the Akatsuki member's neck breaking, Gaara was oblivious to his surroundings. After swiftly demolishing a section of the wall, the Raikage hurried to locate Sasuke. Gaara sat in his chair and experienced a feeling he hadn't had in a long time. His blood was boiling with rage. Thirst for blood. For Sasuke's sake, not just anyone's. He turned to glare at whoever it was that nudged him in the side. The glare Gaara gave him made Kankuro flinch in terror, and the sight of Gaara's eyes made his blood run cold with rage and thirst. Gaara, he stammered, sensing the immense urge to kill that Gaara was just about to contain. Not since the days prior to his battle with Naruto Uzumaki had he felt this way. "We are also heading out to locate the Uchiha," Gaara stated icily. Without allowing his siblings to complain, he got up and started to head for the hall, saying, "I must confirm about Naruto." The fence-sitter questioned, "Why do you care so much about him?" The words, "his well-being is of no concern to you," caused Gaara to halt and fight the impulse to give him a stern look. He answered without glancing at him. "Unlike you, I'll never desert myself, and I don't desert a friend," he said icily. He left as quietly as he could and proceeded down the stairs and hallways without listening to any of the teasing that took place. He heard samurai running down the halls and shouting. He began to shake with rage and excitement as he followed, leading him to where Sasuke might be. He heard Temari exclaim, "Gaara," in a worried tone. Temari asked, "What is it?" Despite not anticipating the harsh tone in his voice, she persisted. "You have to calm down, Gaara." As his poise wavered, after she said that, he ceased to move. Temari swallowed, recalling too vividly the sensation she had just before the Chunin exams. Temari felt the almost overwhelming urge to run away from her younger brother as they came to a halt behind him and a hush fell over them. The silence was broken by a slight tremor that echoed through the hall. "Naruto is a dear friend," he said quietly, turning to face his older brother. Temari expected a deathly glare, but instead she received a somber one. "He showed me the way," he understood. "Because we were both Jinchuriki." Temari and Kankuro stared in stunned silence at his manner, having never seen this side of him before. "I'm proud to have him as the first friend I ever made." The building shook once more from the fighting going on below them. He concluded and carried on, saying, "Because of him, I was able to become cage of my village. I have a village to protect from the Akatsuki and the Uchiha as part of them." He accelerated his pace as he moved forward and descended what he thought were the final stairs. "Naruto, you can't be." He walked into a large room where he saw 2 people in a crater in the ground. The Raikage was trying to kill one of them, who he knew to be Sasuke. Gaara needed to talk to him, but he was tempted to let him kill Sasuke. Confusion spread among the several people in the room as he swiftly sent out his sand to stop the Raikage's attack. Withdrawing from the resulting crater, the Raikage joined his 2 guards. He told the Kumo leader, "I need to speak to him," as the samurai was engulfed in black flames. Gaara watched Kankuro tend to him. He pulled back his sand and glared at the alleged final Uchiha. "If you value your lives, Samurai, I suggest you leave this between ninja. Gaara of the desert, as he gained his feet off the cracked concrete. The Raikage made fun of Gaara for getting in the way. Gaara focused on examining the final Uchiha with a glare. As Gaara struggled to contain his anger, he felt his blood boil once more and his heart race. He had to control his desire for vengeance or else he might end up like him. Even more hateful than when they had last met, Gaara's eyes were filled with hate. The Sharingan user had blood running down his left eye as he felt murderous intent directed at him. Your eyes are worse than before, Sasuke. Gaara didn't even bat an eye. I can see it. You're lost in the black abyss and you can't see any traces of light anymore, can you? He inquired. When the Sharingan user saw him, a savage grin appeared on his face. Gaara felt his rage threatening to overwhelm him as he said, You're right. All I now know is darkness, because there is nothing more for me in the light. Gaara fought the urge to yell, Tell me, what happened to Naruto? One side of him wanted to tear him to pieces, while the other side wanted to uphold his close friend's principles. The Avenger smiled again, this time with more malice. He's dead, he mocked that. When one of the last Uchiha laughed, Gaara's blood froze. I just wish I only done it with my hands, was something Gaara heard and saw clearly. He had said it so firmly that he was unable to refute it. Gaara closed his eyes when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He experienced a feeling that he believed he had suppressed. Kankuro whispered, Gaara, you can't do it for anything personal. I know, was his humble response. Something moist trickled down Gaara's cheek from his eyes. He's a danger to everyone. He would kill him to protect anyone else he wanted to hurt, not just for personal gain. Gaara believed that it was his obligation to Naruto and that he would do it for the benefit of all the villages. I sincerely apologize, Naruto, he said to Sasuke in a cage. Like voice. He gathered in his chakra and released the sand in his gourd to get ready for battle. If he truly is, then I'm sure he would love for you to join him. Don't let anyone interfere. I'll do this alone, he told his siblings authoritatively. When Gaara noticed a Kumo ninja trying to join them, both of his guards hurried to his aid to explain the circumstances, and Gaara hoped the Raikage would pardon him. Sasuke used this distraction to attack the cage with an Amaterasu. To stop the black flames from spreading pointlessly to the ground, Gaara threw out his sand. Abruptly, he sensed his presence behind him. He's quick. The blade was stopped a few inches from his sand defense as his katana slashed toward his abdomen. He tried to catch Sasuke by manipulating his sand, but he swiftly slipped to the right and fled to the room's edge. Gaara moved away to create some space between them and kept trying to make him defensive so he couldn't approach. Sasuke leapt onto a nearby pillar and fled halfway before the sand caught up with him as he fled the approaching sand. While in the air, he performed a few hand signals and had a clear view of the former Jinchuriki and the other shinobi behind him. He leapt off to avoid being crushed by the sand. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. He exhaled after taking a deep breath, and a massive wall of roaring fire rushed in the direction of the sand user. To protect themselves from the assault, the sand that was pursuing him retreated. While still in the air, Sasuke used his fire jutsu and his Mangekyo Sharingan to fire an Amaterasu. The jutsu spread the black flames evenly. Gaara noticed a huge ball of fire that engulfed the enormous room. In order to make more sand, he had already broken down some of the debris left by the crater. The Raikage was among the few individuals in danger inside a sand dome when the black and red wall of flame approached and swiftly covered them. As he covered himself in sand and felt the heat seeping through, he felt as though he had been placed in an oven. His eyes met darkness. He swiftly spread the sand around himself as he felt it disappear, and a thin layer of glass dropped from his sand defense. He brought it to his gourd after letting the others out of his sand dome. Sasuke was standing 12 meters away when he took a step forward and felt the glass crack beneath his feet. Your absolute defense is still alive and well, I see, he said. Sasuke grinned as Gaara simply glared at him. The cage saw that he was offended and asked, Do you really think you can kill me alone? Yes, Gaara answered, causing the Sharingan user to growl in his direction. Sasuke sheathed his sword and hovered his right hand over his left shoulder, saying, To think I once compared myself to you. Only, such conceit, was Sasuke's response. Over his right hand, Gaara heard a bird chirping and saw lightning cackling. He won't use that jutsu to get close enough. Gaara got his sand ready to catch him. I don't need to get close. He waved his hand down, and Gaara stared in shock. Chidori Senbon. Dozens of lightning needles flew in his direction. They were too close to avoid entirely. Gaara, aware of the Chidori's piercing power, leapt back to buy time as the hand's signs swiftly passed. Wind style. Great breakthrough. He felt some of the first few lightning needles graze him, passing right through his sand armor, but he was too slow to release Taijutsu. As one pierced his leg and another his shoulder, he felt pain and something moist leaking out. When he let go of the jutsu, a tremendous gust of wind swiftly ripped through the last few dozen needles, causing them to vanish from the world. The hurricane swiftly threw them backwards toward a wall because Sasuke didn't anticipate a jutsu other than his sand. A few meters behind him, he slammed hard against a concrete wall, leaving a tiny crater in the wall from the force of the impact. If not for a partial Susanoo that deflected the blow, it would have been lethal. Gaara gathered his sand in front of him, ignoring the pain he had received in the brief jutsu trade. Off. Successive shots. Sand drizzle. Sasuke fled the crater he was flung into as hundreds of sand bullets swiftly raced in his direction. Gaara declared, "It's over." Gaara approached his adversary and fired off his jutsu repeatedly, making sure he wouldn't miss, to ensure he wouldn't live. Dust, sand, and pieces of concrete flew into the air and blocked his view as the sand bullets raced and hit their target. Gaara remembered his sand after a brief moment of his jutsu ending. "He's still alive," exclaimed one of the Raikage's guards. A huge purple skeleton materialized and sped in his direction. "What is this?" as the creature struck the confused Kage with a right hook. To protect himself from the attack, his sand swiftly moved to his left side. A tremendous force struck the sand, and there was a brief silence as the sands separated after colliding. As the attack struck Gaara's side, sending him hurtling through the air, he stared in disbelief. He manipulated his sand to catch Gaara before he struck the wall, barely maintaining consciousness. Feeling his sand armor crumble, he dropped to his knees on the ground. He painfully popped his dislocated shoulder back into place after experiencing shoulder pain and breaking several ribs. He heard Sasuke yell, "Gaara!" Gazing at a purple mechanical skeleton that resembled a phantom, Gaara shook his confusion away and said, "My defense is even more absolute than yours." It seemed to be holding a sword in his left hand, and its height reached over halfway to the tall ceiling. As his siblings tried to reach him, he could hear their anxious yells. He used his sand to stop them before they could even approach, and he returned them to the still, recovering Raikage. He yelled at them, "I'll handle this alone. I must complete this task for Naruto." "Is this your dark power?" he asked, taking in the scene. Gaara didn't boast about his power, but he didn't stop others from doing so. Only those who control the double Mangekyo can use this power. "The Susanoo," Sasuke declared. "Your sand can't compare. That arrogance will be your downfall, Uchiha." He stumbled to his feet after experiencing a sudden, intense pain in his left knee, which made it difficult for him to move. He felt that letting his sand carry him was his only option. "Die." The enormous sword slashed right, almost severing him in two, and smashed a big pillar that held up the ceiling. With the aid of his sand, Gaara narrowly avoided a few more slashes while maintaining several meters above the ground. "My attacks won't work like this," he said as he fired another round of his sand bullets, which struck Susanoo's exterior before falling pointlessly to the ground. "How can I get him to leave?" As he leapt from his sand platform to avoid a sudden overhead swing from the Susanoo, which caused a small crater as it slammed against the ground, he created another platform to land on. "Is it impenetrable?" He stood glaring at Gaara while he looked at Sasuke, who was entirely encircled by his Susanoo, and a picture of Naruto appeared in his mind, those words that were spoken to him, those words that transformed him. The orange-clad boy struggled to crawl towards Gaara, who watched helplessly. "The agony of being alone is nearly intolerable, isn't it? I've been there, in that lonely, dark place, and I understand how it feels, but now I have other people who are very important to me. They are more important to me than I am to myself, and I will not allow anyone to harm them. I will never give up because of this. Even if it means killing you, I will stop you. I was rescued from myself by them. They saved me from being alone. They were the first to embrace my identity. They're my pals." He utterly believed what he said, and Gaara could see the conviction in his eyes. Naruto never gave up, he muttered to himself as he began examining Sasuke's Susanoo for any possible weak spots. "It was because of you, Naruto, that I found those precious to me," he said, avoiding two more slashes that would have killed him. "You were one of them," he said, scattering some of his sand on the ground. Sasuke saw Gaara send a blanket of sand from his elevated position directly at him. He scoffed at his stupidity for once again trying to attack him. He seemed too distracted by his useless attack, so Sasuke raised the sword of his Susanoo to deal the finishing blow. He felt something tighten around his ankle. He looked down in shock at arm of sand around it. It got through? He put him off balance as he missed the killing blow to Gaara. He was pulled out from under. He felt pain in head as hit the concrete and pulled away from his Susanoo. He felt disoriented as he was whipped around and saw his vision darken. He felt the sand around his leg increase in pressure. Sasuke screamed in agony as the sand completely crushed his leg up to his knee. The grip on him was lost as he was thrown. He felt more pain as he tumbled on the hard concrete floor and his body thrown against the wall. Gaiak. He coughed his blood. His body refused to cooperate and searing hot pain coursed through his body when he attempted to do so. His vision got blurry as he saw his blood gushing out from his missing leg. He heard the screams of the Karen calling out his name and wave of sand rushing towards him before his pain caused him to black out. The Sharingan user who was lying on the ground was fully covered by Gaara's entire supply of sand. Now, sand burial. The sand was clearly compressed as he finished his jutsu, and he heard a woman sitting up on the balcony scream as he closed his fist to finish him off. The Kumo ninja remarked, "He's dead, I don't feel his chakra." Gaara assumed he was a sensory ninja and checked for himself through his retracted sand. He felt nothing, but he didn't see any blood flowing. Not quite. Gaara lowered himself to the ground, joined by his siblings and the Raikage himself, who had recovered from chopping off his arm. What a massive disappointment Sasuke was. "You did quite the number on MK's cage," he said as a swirl appeared on the balcony above, a person wearing an orange mask and a bleeding Sasuke on his back. "Who are you?" Gaara inquired, and the Raikage followed suit. "Well, how about we first acquire the other cage, prior to beginning our introductions?" Kakashi looked up at the clear cerulean sky, where he had just gone to check on Sakura, who had fainted from exhaustion from working too hard on injured civilians. The sun was hot, but the cool wind washed it away, and as he shifted his weight, he felt the dirt grate against his foot. If he hadn't felt a nearly impossible weight on his shoulders, Kakashi would have called it a beautiful day. He gazed down at the memorial set for heroes who died in the line of duty, staring at the few names he knew, including Obito Uchiha. Why do the good people I've known die so young? He closed his eye at a memory and reflected on his old team as he gazed down at the recently inscribed Naruto Uzumaki. He felt it was much too soon, as Kakashi looked sorrowfully at the name. "I've also made the decision to have my name engraved on that stone. Hero. I'll turn into that," loudly, Naruto declared. For a few dead silences, he gazed at the name in silence. "I suppose. You truly turned into a hero, Naruto, did you? It's been more than a week. The extraction only takes 3 days," he argued with himself, feeling uneasy as he looked at the name. "Am I giving up too?" He was angry at the startling realization that he had died without even knowing who his parents were. "I failed your father, Naruto." He shed a few tears from his uncovered eye. "I've failed as a sensei." He thought about the orange-clad ninja, the avenger turned murderer, and the suffering medic nin he taught. Naruto was suddenly in a state of whiteness, and he looked to his right and left, but he couldn't find the source of the soft, feminine voice, which sounded almost maternal. At first, he thought he was back in the whiteness he had seen earlier, but this time, there was a sense of calm that accompanied it, which made him wary of the situation he was in just a moment ago. He had been speaking with Kurama. He turned incredulously to see a short woman with silky long red hair wearing a green apron and tan clothes underneath it. "Behind you, silly," he heard, sounding amused. "What on earth are you?" Wondering where in hell he was, Naruto screamed. Before she recovered, Naruto noticed a faint expression of disappointment on her face as she said, "Not the answer I expected. Did Minato fail to tell you anything?" A nostalgic look replaced her former expression. Naruto felt his eyes go wide in surprise. "Is she?" Naruto felt his throat constrict. She smiled slightly, her eyes closed in contemplation. "That's right. I'm your Mo." He heard someone interrupt his dream. Naruto.kun. Naruto managed to hold onto his memory as he opened his eyes slowly, finding Hinata sitting on Konan's bed and Konan standing between the beds, with little to do but eat and sleep while two kunoichi eyed him like hawks. At least they weren't nurses or doctors who kept checking on him or ignored him, so their conversations with him at least nullified his boredom, and he sat up to have a proper conversation with Konan and Hinata. "How are you?" As he asked, he looked curiously at both of them, wondering what they needed. Naruto noticed a demanding expression on Konan's face, hoping it wasn't too harsh, and he glanced at Hinata, who also had a very curious expression. The amber-eyed woman said, "Since you're almost completely recovered, I think it's about time you tell us your plan." Naruto considered how honest it was, realized that he still needed to explain to them exactly what they needed to do, and discovered that he was actually kind of enjoying unwinding, especially with the two of them. However, he was growing a little restless and he was itching to run and go somewhere. All right. He might as well tell them, he didn't want to get them in the no last minute. He was still recovering and he was told another week should suffice to get back on track. They still needed to plan out more. He didn't know all too much about spying and infiltration. Well, more about the spying part at least. Konan sat herself down beside Hinata to get comfortable while Naruto attempted to gather his thoughts. Anyways, I already told you that we need to get the rest of Kurama's chakra. Kurama? Konan and Hinata both had confused expressions on their faces as they added. Oh right, it's the Kyuubi's name, he told them. Hinata felt a little uneasy as she recalled the chakra's sensation when it was released. It was completely different from the Naruto she knew, and all she had experienced was intense hatred. However, why do you require it? Hinata inquired, still astonished that the Kyuubi's power had been reduced to half of what it had once been. He confidently stated, I promised Kurama that I would help him, and besides, I don't really think I could take on the rest of the Akatsuki with how I am now. He saw Hinata about to disagree, and he explained, I barely defeated Nagato, and they have the power of 8 other Biju. She hesitated for a moment before reluctantly nodding, stating that he didn't need such an evil-feeling power, but she knew how set Naruto could be on things, and that if they had the power of the other Biju, they would need everything. 8. She reasoned that they had already waited long enough for Tobi to recover, so she didn't know when he would carry out their plan. But the Kyuubi was the last one to be sealed. Konan asked incredulously. Naruto shook his head. Kurama claimed that only a tiny portion of the Gyuki, the 8 tails in, whatever it was present. So they don't have the entire thing yet, he said, leaving Konan a little perplexed. Would it still work? He asked. Where is it, then? The rest of the Kyuubi's chakra, Konan inquired, wondering where it was stored and why, given her position in the Akatsuki, such information was entirely overlooked. In a way, though, it was a boon. It's sealed in my dad, caught Hinata off guard. Who is he? Where was he the entire time? She asked, her brows furrowed in annoyance that he would leave his own son to bear the weight alone. Naruto's smile stunned her once more. Naruto grinned, but only when he mentioned his father's identity. My dad was the Yondaime Hokage, he said proudly. What? Uncharacteristically, Hinata yelled in surprise, her mouth hanging open as she said, no wonder he's so handsome. She recalled seeing a picture of him when she was in the academy, but she never would have guessed that he was his son. Her shock was cut short when she realized that he was the reason Naruto had a difficult life, and Konan's eyebrows raised in a more subdued manner, which was partially due to her stoic disposition. Yes. He grinned broadly, and Naruto could see Hinata's worry as well as their confusion. But, I mean he's the one who... Konan and Hinata exchanged astonished looks as Konan said, I don't care about that Hinata. Chan. He had complete faith in me, you know. He said he couldn't trust anyone else with it, he said, raising his thumb to his chest. Although I did sort of lose it, he said, smiling broadly again before closing his eyes. He laughed nervously. Konan, somewhat perplexed, remarked, but you said it was sealed in him. Shouldn't the Kyuubi's chakra be returned if he's dead? For a moment, both girls gaped at him in shock. Crazy, right? The Yondaime sealed himself and the rest of Kurama's chakra with a jutsu, so now it's stuck in the belly of the Shinigami. However, disregard that fact. We must obtain Kurama's chakra. He put it back in. How are we going to do that? Hinata asked, noticing that he squirmed a little and appeared uneasy. Mom said Dad had come across it while researching the Hiraishin, and it didn't sit well with him at all, Naruto said uneasily. Apparently the second Hokage made a jutsu that would revive the dead called Edo Tensai. My mom told me that there's supposed to be a mask that would break the seal and release Kurama and the Yondaime. Where is it? Hinata inquired. Konan was the first to say, it's in Uzushiogakure. Apparently there was an Uzumaki clan that was wiped out a long time ago. Everyone paused to consider their situation. All right. In a more straightforward manner, it seems straightforward enough in theory. The first thing we need to find is the jutsu. We find the jutsu, go to Uzushiogakure, and summon your father, she summarized. Konan winced, but he didn't seem to hear or pay attention to what he was saying. Yeah. Except the forbidden scroll was probably lost in the attack. I've been thinking about it for the past few days in Pervy. Sage said something about that snake bastard Orochimaru was obsessed with jutsu, so he might have it somewhere in one of his bases, he went on. I heard that the Sandaime fought with Orochimaru who summoned both the first and second Hokage, said Hinata. He might have used that jutsu. Yes, that bastard does have it, but how could I ever forget? I know where one of his hideouts is now, but I'm not sure, Naruto retorted. Just in case, I'll send a toad to search for the forbidden scroll. Didn't he have a large number of secret safe houses spread throughout several countries? Finding one would be nearly impossible, and there was a remote possibility that he wouldn't keep copies, Hinata continued. It makes no difference because we can't fail. There's no way. The girls saw a fierce determination ignite in his eyes, and Konan laughed as he observed, almost like. In order to attract the attention of both teenagers, Konan added, Orochimaru was once part of the Akatsuki. He was partnered with Sasori. Thinking it was a dead end, Naruto continued, but we didn't find much on Sasori. That's good, it's quite fortunate for us. When he defected, Kakazu got into a few skirmishes with him to obtain his bounty, Konan said. How does this benefit us, then? Konan ignored Naruto's interruption and carried on with her theory. After another lengthy pause, he nodded in agreement as she explained, there's a possibility that he might have tried to track him and might have found one of his hideouts. It's a possible lead. There's another Akatsuki safe house in Taki, where Kakazu was from. Hinata said somewhat hesitantly, but we must do all we can. We don't have much to go on. Yes, he sat on the edge of the bed and said, we must make every effort to locate it. The two kunoichi watched as he quickly nicked his thumb that drew blood. Summoning jutsu, he struck the ground with his right palm, and when the smoke cleared, Fukasaku emerged. He grinned broadly and said, Naruto. Boy, I see you're doing better already. Leaning on Naruto's bed to make it easier to look up and to speak more comfortably, he turned to face the three people and said, I've told of the toads, and we've been doing what you asked. That's fantastic. Oh yeah, I remembered I haven't introduced you to them, he said cheerfully, pointing to the girls seated on the bed. That's Hinata Chan, he said, pointing to the Byakugan user who had introduced herself. And that's Konan Chan, he said, nodding at the blue-haired woman. And this is Geezer Sage, he said, completing the formal introductions. It's Fukasaku, he clarified, a proper name. Anyway, Geezer Sage, are you able to check Konoha for the Forbidden Scroll? Fukasaku asked him, his face curious, obviously eager to get an explanation, but he chose not to press the issue, recalling Naruto's previous orders. I'll see what I can do, Naruto. Boy, he said, even though he didn't think the toads would find it. In the meantime, there's some important things that you might want to hear, he suggested, and Naruto accepted. Fukasaku informed him of everything that had happened since his disappearance, including the attempted searches, Tsunade's coma, Danzo's ascent to the position of Hokage, the two new rogue ninja, and the 5-cage summit that was scheduled for later today. Hinata watched Naruto as he processed the new information, clearly hurt by all the bad things that had happened to Konoha and Sasuke's status as a rogue. He must feel that he betrayed Konoha. As Fukasaku scattered to head back to Mount Myoboku, he said, thanks. Naruto. Kun. Konan interrupted, capturing the blonde's grumpy focus. Is anyone aware that the Kyuubi's chakra was divided in two? He gave a headshake. He said softly, I think only a few people know, for sure that masked guy Tobi doesn't know. I'm sure we're some of the only ones alive who do. Konan nodded, and before she left the cabin, Hinata glanced at her. Naruto. Kun. Hinata spoke softly, and he gave her a slightly distressed look. I just want them to know that I'm all right. He sighed sadly, though, and Hinata listened carefully as he said, I don't know anymore. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do about Sasuke. His expression was grim. He helped in extracting Kurama, he thought. Hinata recognized the confusion and conflicting emotions in his eyes and said, he's still like a brother to him. She got out of bed and approached him, giving him a hug while he was still sitting down, something she had never been able to do before all of this. I'm sure you'll find out what when you see him next time, she said into his ear, not even sure when they would meet and hoping it wasn't in a desperate situation. She felt him relax a little, and he returned her hug, resting his chin over her shoulder. A tiny smile appeared on her lips. Yeah, I think I'll know. I hope, he said. They hugged until Naruto was completely at ease, and then a relaxed silence fell over them as he thought about Sasuke. Hinata was thrilled that she could finally do this with him, and the blonde thought happily about his mother and what she had said. I was happy, he smiled, even though she was a Jinchuriki. He opened his eyes and breathed in the pleasant scent of lavender. She can't be comfortable, he said, observing her leaning slightly from where she was standing. A sly smile came to his face. I'll have to thank her for cheering me up. He swiftly placed her on his lap while still holding her waist, causing her to eep. She sat sideways on his lap, her legs hanging from the edge of the bed. Naruto. Kun, she asked, flustered at the more intimate position she was now in. He saw a more intense blush wash over her petite and slender face. What are you doing? He gazed at her luscious, pink lips, which trembled slightly at the close contact due to her shyness and timidity. He said, I just want to thank you, with a simple smile. Ho, was all he heard before he captured her in a small kiss. He heard a small moan in appreciation as he did, and the simple kiss deepened. He felt the soft and amazing feeling of her lips upon his as they moved in unison. The faint taste of cinnamon, as he found out she had an appreciation of cinnamon buns, as he glided his tongue across her upper lip. With Naruto's mostly restored state, the movement of lips began to get more feverish. Naruto felt her hand run through his hair, a gesture he greatly appreciated. He became aware of her movements and feelings. The slight nervous shaking of her arm that rested on his shoulder and back, how much love she tried to convey through her lips. He felt the warm heat of her body as he slithered his left arm around her waist, his other arm resting on her knee with his hand resting on partway up her thigh. He longed for more intimate contact, for her sweater to conveniently come off and to feel her smooth skin under his hands. He got himself under control as he contented himself by moving the hand on her waist towards up her back to flow his hand through her hair. She elicited another moan. They broke off their session due to the need for air, and Naruto took deep breaths as she looked shyly away, her cheeks still pink. He felt his heart race, and he could feel a hint of cinnamon on his lips, along with some numbness and tingling. He brought himself under control by peeking at the midnight-haired Kunoichi sitting on his lap, and he saw a satisfied smile and felt a tug on his lips as well. He put a finger to her chin to get her to face him, but she avoided his gaze and he moved slowly to her lips once more. Konan opened the cabin door without a word, wondering if his bad mood had improved. She had left them because she didn't feel comfortable or capable of trying to lift someone's spirits, but she stopped dead in her tracks when she saw Hinata and Naruto kissing and hugging passionately, and they ignored her as she turned back outside and took a deep breath. Why am I jealous? She asked herself. Naruto watched in silence as Hinata assumed her Juken stance, which was, to put it mildly, elegant. Oh, this is going to be so awesome, he thought, recalling the fight he had witnessed during the Chunin exams, but this one would be much more laid back, with no patronizing remarks or immediate dangere, just a straightforward spar. He watched as the older blue-haired woman stood across from her on a grass field. It seemed that Hinata had started training with the older blue-haired woman 3 days prior, and this was the first time he had the opportunity to witness their training. Oh, I see, do your best, both of you, he shouted, bouncing as he sat. He applauded them with his hands raised, observing Hinata's grateful smile and faint flush. Konan exchanged a quick look and nodded quietly. She answered, I'm just helping train one of her jutsu Naruto-kun. His enthusiasm seemed to be unfazed by the information, and he smiled broadly, saying that it didn't matter at all. Her heart thumped a little, but she ignored it and focused on the Hyuga, remembering when Hinata had asked her to assist with training. I apologize, she answered. She said, I need your help, Konan-chan. Konan was still a little uncomfortable with her honorific. Why is the honorific used? She asked, and the girl turned to face her after glancing briefly at the cabin door. She was about to say, it's because you helped save him. Please don't. We saved him in large part because of you, and I really don't want to consider what might have happened. There's nothing I could do to thank you, she said, taking a deep breath. You want to help him, and I want to help him too, Konan said, looking at her in silence. A tiny smile appeared on Konan's lips. Very well. Konan observed that she was able to at least make some progress with her, and she asked Hinata to explain her skills, which were all Byakugan techniques, a close-range fighter, but she did have a particular long-range jutsu that she had used, which she discovered she hadn't mastered yet. She expressed her doubts that they could help her, as she didn't even know the jutsu they were capable of, but was reassured that Hinata already knew her clan's techniques, but she wasn't able to master them. She had simply needed a partner to assist her with them. In the hours they had spent training together, Hinata had so far, she was able to unleash the vacuum palm with a success rate of 50%, which was not satisfactory but was an improvement over her previous abilities. They also worked a little bit of her rotation technique, which only met with failure, but she was intrigued by the mechanics of how it worked. They were in a large grass clearing, some spots of dirt filled the area. Trees were at the edge of the clearing, a cliff face to his left, behind where Konan stood. A small stream was at his right behind the midnight-haired girl. He blushed while he checked out her form. It was mostly hidden by her clothing, but since he had seen her wear in a nightgown, which was fairly modest but clung to her form more so than her usual clothing. He couldn't stop imagining what she looked like under her baggy clothing. He had to admit she was amazingly well curved. Oh no, am I a closet pervert too? Like that Ebisu guy? He looked away to face Konan, with an emotionless expression, and stood calmly in no form of taijutsu, which wasn't her main style of fighting. She wore the dark red cloak, which he immediately began to undress in his mind as well. His detailing wasn't as conservative, since she didn't dress quite as modest as Hinata. Her creamy legs and piercings on her navel, she wasn't quite as gifted in her bosom as Hinata. Oh god no. He lowered his head in embarrassment. The two pale kunoichi came together as a result of his vivid imagery. Pale skin, captivating eyes, and various indigo hues were characteristics they had in common. Their kunoichi. Awarded well. Defined bodies made them ask, why am I acting this way? He asked himself. Evidently, when Hinata attempted to face Konan with her palm, the spar had already begun. She yelled, and it appeared as though a stream of compressed air had blasted from her hand and raced in the direction of the kunoichi with the blue hair. Konan's shikigami dance, which effectively turned her into paper, helped her avoid the condensed bullet. She's capable of that. Alluding to their respective jutsu. She used paper, I knew that, but to transform herself into one? Quote. Another jutsu move from Hinata knocked down a tree that had missed Konan. Other than dodging and throwing some paper shuriken, it appeared that she made no attempt to attack. Which, when it struck Hinata, bounced off harmlessly, but she made a concerted effort to avoid them. The vacuum air palm, Hinata attempted to fire, but it did nothing, he observed. She leapt to the right to avoid some mock shuriken. She extended another hand for it, but it failed again. Naruto saw a brief moment of disappointment and annoyance before she withdrew. He witnessed Hinata attempt to fire two more people, but only one of them was successful. Enough, Konan answered. She regained her normal state and let her jutsu go. Hinata seemed a little uneasy around Konan. Her training was suffering as a result. She declared, but we just started, as she made her way to the center. You're distracted, with a quick look at Naruto. Naruto exclaimed, what was that jutsu Hinata-chan, before Hinata could respond. She answered, 8 trigrams vacuum air palm. It was awesome. Thank you. But, I haven't mastered it yet, she replied. Well, I'm sure you'll master it in no time, no problem you know, he responded. Hinata appeared somewhat taken aback by how casually he said it. Have faith in me. With hesitation, she said, really, do you think that Naruto-kun? With a broad smile, he exclaimed, of course. My girlfriend is pretty awesome you know, when she said, I'm Naruto-kun's girlfriend, her heart skipped a beat. He had never before genuinely admitted that they were together. It brought her joy, she thought she could accomplish anything because of it. She answered, let's try again, Konan-chan. Konan saw the slight change in her normally bashful manner. Her expression changed to one of determination. I suppose he could also do that. Very well, they said as they made their way back to where they had been. She concealed her astonishment when the teenager with the midnight hair successfully executed 9 consecutive jutsu shots, with only one shot failing. Naruto said, but, I'm going to die, with dismay. She yelled, hell no. Not on my watch you know, out of her red head. Naruto gave his mother a disbelieving glance. Huh? She grinned affectionately and said, parents are supposed to watch out for their children. I'm an awesome kunoichi you know, I'm going to do everything I can to help my son. Kushina nodded in response to Naruto's question, you have a plan? The blonde exclaimed with excitement. Okay, then let's hear it, I'm going to save the world. Mom, I'm going to do for you and dad and everybody else. I'm going to bring peace. When he saw his mother's sad smile and silence, his excitement subsided. With thoughtfulness, Kushina closed her eyes. Naruto nodded in sorrowful comprehension as he said, I want to be careful, and because of that I'm going to disappear after this. She said quietly, but I believe you Naruto. I believe you can do it. There was a pause before Naruto turned to face her. I'm so glad I got to be your mother. The red-haired woman looked in awe and said, it's okay, Mom. I'm the son of 2 awesome ninja. As she approached him, she said, just be happy okay. It's all I ever wanted for you. Naruto grinned broadly. You got it, Mom. She gave him a protective embrace, which Naruto gladly gave back. After calming herself with a few deep breaths, she placed her hands on his shoulders and held him at arm's length. She raised her hand momentarily to dab at her tears. Okay. I'm going to put 3 different kind of seals on you. Inquiringly, seals, what for? He asked. She asked, just listen okay. And proceeded with her plan after receiving a nod. Right, the first seal is to temporarily seal your chakra so it can't be seen even with a dojutsu, and the second one works in conjunction with it as it works by putting you in death-like state for a limited time, she clarified. He began to get excited again, saying, wow. Fuinjutsu is awesome, How come nobody told me that? Perhaps I can pick up some knowledge, he thought eagerly. Kushina gave a nod of agreement and went on. She clarified, this final seal is the one that will save you. Since you're an Uzumaki, you'll at least live for a little while after the Kyuubi gets extracted from you. Really? She said, nodding. The statement, it's not enough, you'll die sooner or later, caused Naruto to hang his head in dismay. She comforted him by saying, but that's where my last seal comes in. My chakra has healing properties, and I'll store inside a seal and hope that's enough to save you. Alright, that's awesome. She collected chakra in her hand and asked, are you ready? I'm going to place the seals on your back. I'm ready when you are, he said, removing his jacket and turning away from her. As she placed her hand on his back to finish a seal, she said, I was actually supposed to help you take control of the Kyuubi's chakra. Aw wait. He turned to face her again and asked, what's going on? I completely forgot, I can't send you out without a plan, she screamed. She chastised himself, saying, I was just about to send you off without even trying to figure something out. Naruto let out a loud laugh. He laughed again and said, I guess I really do take after you, huh? She disregarded her son's laughter as she came up with solutions for him, saying, whatever you know, let me quickly think of something. Looking at his mother with interest, Naruto said, we might have to talk with the Kyuubi. Now, let's have a personal chat with the fox, shall we? Ignoring her words, I said, so I guess so much for those goodbyes, huh mom? Whatever, we'll just do that after, I don't think it'll have much of an effect though. A mask? Inquired Naruto. A white mask with thin red stripes running horizontally down, it was given to him by Konan. The eyes were encircled by more red paint. It was shaped like an Anbu mask and asked, does it really have to be a fox one? Naruto looked up to see the blue-haired woman wearing a faintly sheepish expression. Naturally, Naruto was seated on the bed with Hinata at his side. Only moments before, Konan had entered and opened a scroll to reveal some items. As she gave one to Hinata, she said, it was the only one they had in bulk. It was just like the one he was holding. Except that the colors are reversed. And fitting, I suppose. He inquired, you mean you bought more? Why do we need these? I assume you don't want to change your appearance, she inquired. To be honest, she would much rather he didn't like hair color and the such, so you won't be easily recognized by someone you know, or if anyone that we come across won't describe your appearance. She clarified that and received an understanding nod. I've attached some seals so that the Byakugan will not be able to see through it, but can be seen through the inside. We can't risk you being recognized by anything that can be distinguished by you. Hinata went on, does that mean he can't wear orange? She clarified, mostly, just more subtle. Well, Naruto said, glancing at his attire, as long as I get to wear some orange. He was dressed simply in orange pants and a plain orange t-shirt. It wasn't exactly battle-ready clothing. He was the only person he knew who would choose to wear that particular color, and it was dazzlingly bright. Even though he might have to use less color, he would never be without it. He was, after all, the Orange Hokage of the future Konoha. Well, I'll need some new clothes now. The temperature outside had begun to drop. Fortunately, there's a festival going on in the town and we'll be to blend in smoothly, Konan stated. Hinata, really? How so? Naruto observed the diverse individuals strewn across the street, while small stands and vendors occupied the sidewalks. They were in a big square with lots of different-looking rides in the center. A variety of stands selling toys, trinkets, and playable minigames lined the sides and a few streets leading up to the square. There was a street behind that sold a variety of food and sweets. Naruto shouted, so let's look for some clothes. From behind his fox mask, somewhat muffled, he covered himself with the dark red cloak. Fortunately, he didn't stand out from the crowd because many of the other customers and the kids they passed were also dressed as foxes, falcons, boars, oxen, and other animals. As they hurriedly searched for any indication of clothing stores, he held Hinata's hand. He heard the adults sitting in the bars of the buildings, talking intoxicatedly, and the numerous children running and laughing. He heard the loud calls of speakers, the numerous blaring noises of machinery, and the screams of joy as they rode the rides. Nevertheless, he could hear Hinata humming happily as she held onto his right arm. To his left, he saw Konan strolling beside them, her face as emotionless as ever. He considered how she might have been prior to Yahiko's passing. It had altered both Nagato and her. He pondered how her stoic exterior contrasted with her personality. He wanted to break down her barriers and reveal the real Konan. There's some clothing over there. He turned to see some stands in the street where she had indicated. As they made their way to the store, they both said, all right. Let's just get some clothes with orange with it, okay? The only entrance was in front, and it was covered by a large cover. There was a counter on the left, and racks of various kinds of clothes were arranged in a tidy manner. He looked into the shelves and rack, and Hinata looked into the other side. Occasionally, he rejected one of the indigo-haired suggestions for an outfit while perusing a variety of jackets and pants. He gave the two women he was with some thought. They had some things in common, but they also had some things in common. Konan's voice was firm and sexy, while Hinata's was cute and soft. However, he found their eyes to be fascinating, the golden eyes of Konan, which concealed her feelings. In some way, Hinata's white, pupilless eyes told him everything. One was very self-assured, while the other was, well, working on it. He continued to initiate their kisses, and he enjoyed the sensation of her hand curled in his hair and those soft lips against his. He wondered how her lips would compare to Konan's, and an intrusive thought came in. "What? I'm fine," he told the white-eyed girl who was watching with concern as he choked on his spit and pushed down the heat that was streaming into his face. To clear his throat of the irritating material, he coughed. It was really confusing. Where the hell did that come from? I'm with Hinata-chan now. She was definitely older than him, maybe a few years younger than Kakashi. Since no one ever discussed their ages and Shinobi didn't live long anyway, he could only make a rough guess. Undoubtedly, things became a little awkward when he was unable to walk alone. He could see flattery in her eyes when he saw her essentially half-naked. He lost consciousness and glanced through clothes without bothering to check. He felt like slapping himself when he saw her form appear before his eyes, but he also didn't want to interrupt his train of thought. I suppose I am a closet pervert, am I not? He now began to comprehend Jiraiya to a certain extent. A few days prior, Hinata had begun their makeout session after sitting on his lap. He wanted to touch her smooth skin, and when she groaned during their kiss, he took pleasure in the gesture, even though he knew he was to blame. He wanted to see her writhe beneath him, scream out his name in ecstasy, and moan louder. It's pervy. Sage, damn it. He swore. He also cursed his other sensei for reading those obscene books he always had with him. Damn it, Kakashi. Sensei. Hinata looked up from her search and said, huh? When Naruto saw that she had removed her mask and used a genjutsu to change the color of her eyes, he realized that he had actually cursed out loud. It was quite strange to see that she had pupils in her eyes, which had a blue tint that was similar to his own. He became aware that this was distracting him and that he much preferred to see her in person. He couldn't possibly tell Hinata, who was so innocent and sweet, that he was thinking more than just a little about Konan and her. Fortunately for him, he had a cloak on that totally concealed his pants. Nothing. I was just disappointed about how there was no cool-looking orange clothes, he responded quickly. With a charming smile, she resumed her search. He congratulated himself for making such a hasty excuse. Reluctantly, he went back to his thoughts. After their makeout session, he had observed that his thoughts about the two kunoichi had become more frequent, wild, and imaginative. He was aware of what it was, but it had never affected him so strongly. While traveling with Jiraiya, he had also been made to read one of those books. He only vaguely remembered the books because they were so boring, as well as a few of the specific romantic scenes. He had learned about sex from Jiraiya in this waya through books. Naruto had asked why he was being taught all of this back then, and he had replied that it was to make things as comfortable as possible to avoid embarrassing them both. Rewind. Trust me, kid. It'll help you. You'll get this certain urges that will only increase the older you get. He gave a wicked grin. As they proceeded on their journey, he briefly lost consciousness before Naruto interrupted, saying, I mean the opposite sex is particularly very, very interesting. Spectacular actually. They had been traveling from Konoha for a few months. With a disappointed sigh, Naruto crossed his arms and said, what are you talking about, pervy? Sage? I'm a ninja, I don't need to learn about this stuff. Jiraiya nodded to himself in agreement and replied, whatever you brat, everyone learns about this one day or another because it's a part of growing up. I don't understand any of it, and don't I have to worry about those Akatsuki douchebags? Well, you have a point there, but that doesn't mean you don't have to learn about it, he just replied. And besides, you need to learn so you'll know what to do when the time comes. No way. I know what you're doing, pervy. Sage, there's no way I'm going to be turned into a pervert like you. Naruto replied. It goes without saying that Naruto's loneliness caused him to be rather ignorant about a lot of things. You fool. There's no way you will be able to surpass the great perv of Mount Myoboku. He screamed loudly. Only when you have written perfected art that rivals my novels and only when you felt the bliss of the company of a woman would I even dare to admit that you have surpassed me. He smiled proudly as he finished. Dryly, Naruto answered, and this is why I call you pervy. Sage. His master's antics did not amuse him. At his nickname, Jiraiya sank, but he quickly rose again. Listen kid, in all seriousness, no doubt one day that you will begin to get intimate with a woman. Naruto laughed. Naruto merely gazed at him and said, it's a part of nature, my dear young pupil. Jiraiya told himself, I can get good at this at times. I have to look out for you. Naruto yawned at his attempts and said, I think I'll skip on that. Jiraiya chuckled with pleasure. What's so funny? He concluded with another of his twisted grins, saying, one day, you will get a girlfriend and those particular urges will only grow stronger, you won't be able to resist. He questioned angrily, yeah right, why are you so stubborn about this? The wise man answered, to make sure you're not stupid in everything. And well, I do want you to become an inspiration to one of my novels one day, Naruto retorted in response to his insult. Finished Jiraiya's meaning behind that was now clear to Naruto. Although they weren't as frequent, he did have those compulsions in the past. He looked at Hinata once more, but she was ignoring him as she examined a pointless object in her hand. He imagined her large breasts beneath that red cloak she wore as he gazed at her seductive pink lips. Before he averted his gaze. To remove the tiny trail of blood that threatened to fall, he wiped his nose under his mask. Pervy sage. Damn it, was the only explanation given to him for letting go of his desires, which was entirely deliberate if he knew Jiraiya. The Hyuga heiress would have to be his sexual partner. She wore a modest nightgown and pressed herself as close to him as she could, which didn't help that those thoughts kept coming back almost every time he looked at her. When Konan approached him and called his attention, he was startled out of his reverie. How about this one? She asked. To his attention, she displayed a red pullover sweater. He studied it carefully, absorbing its details. Except for the orange, almost all of the sweater's fabric was red. There is a bit of fluffy orange fur at the sweater's bottom and collar. Let me try it on. His mother's vivid red hair was reminiscent of the red hue. The sweater was given to him after he removed the cloak. He slipped it on quickly and noticed Hinata looking on in curiosity. The sleeves fit snugly up to his wrists, and the fabric reached his pelvis exactly like his other jacket. It was the ideal fit. When he attempted to pull it out, he discovered that the folded portion was permanently attached. It appeared to be folded at the end of the sleeves, and it was also colored orange. I suppose it's for style. Or something. The orange fur reminded him of Kurama's fur in color and was just large enough to cover his neck. Great choice Konan. Chan. Her question was, you like it? Of course, it's perfect. Despite her inability to see it, he gave her a broad smile. She gave it back with a slight smile, as if his enthusiastic reply was sufficient. What do you think Hinata? Chan? He asked, turning to face the teenager with the midnight hair, but he was never able to get her to respond with a more significant one. As her gaze moved over the form-fitting pullover sweater, a slight flush came over her face. It's great. It fits, really well. Konan. Chan. I must thank you, she said, resisting the urge to lick her lips as she visualized his toned, firm chest beneath it. She covered her blushing face with her own mask. Turning to her, he asked, how about you Konan? Chan. He seemed to seek her approval, but she wasn't really prepared for this. It fits you perfectly, she said. Her word choice was deliberate, too well. All right, let's get it, he exclaimed. He reached for a pair of dark blue pants that would fit him in place of his orange shorts. The two kunoichi promptly concurred. Konan covered their costs, and they left the shop. Naruto changed in a nearby restroom and then chose to show off his new look by removing the cloak. Largely to Hinata's delight. They were debating whether to go back to the cabin or just enjoy the evening as they strolled through the streets and observed the festival in progress. You may enjoy your night together. I doubt that we will have another peaceful night for a while, now that Naruto-kun is back to normal, Konan said. Which caused Hinata to look hopeful before her boyfriend let her down. Nope, Naruto shook his head. No, she patted his stomach and said, let's just get something to eat, I'm starving now. I don't take no for an answer Konan. Chan, so don't bother, Hinata murmured. He can be a bit too generous at times. She answered, I feel a little uncomfortable here. Konan didn't particularly enjoy big crowds. She was more comfortable in private or by herself. Although she appreciated his consideration, she could see that Hinata would much rather be by herself with him. He proposed, then we'll eat somewhere private. Konan glanced at the woman who was walking between them. Her expression was one of acceptance of the circumstances. She leaned closer to the girl. She heard her murmur, he will never abandon his comrades. I see, was her response. She answered loud enough for Naruto to hear, I suppose we can. All right. he said loudly in response. Which, given the loud noise of the festival that seemed to be getting underway, was quite an accomplishment. Let's find some place with ramen. They had ordered a private room away from the commotion at a busy restaurant close to the festival. With the exception of the noise coming in through the window, it was largely soundproof and located on the second floor. The 3 people were seated in a medium-sized room at a small table for 4. Given the elaborate decorations in the room, it was clear that the establishment was successful in its endeavors. Along with the chairs, the table itself was constructed of mahogany wood. There were no indications of wear on the hardwood floor, which was extremely well maintained. In addition to portraits of landscapes and artwork that Naruto didn't particularly care for, the walls featured several portraits of a family that founded the company. He was only concerned with the food they were awaiting. Konan sat across from him, and Hinata sat next to him. They dropped their masks and took a comfortable seat. Hinata said, "It's surprising that they would serve ramen here." She became devoted to Naruto. Which Konan nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it better be good too because that was a lot of Ryo you know," said Naruto. Since he wasn't footing the bill, Konan was a little amused. Naturally, she didn't mind because she had a lot of extra Ryo that she hadn't used. Everything from her Akatsuki days. "Since your strength has fully returned, we should begin to see how capable you are without your tenant," she said. He gave a nod of agreement. Bouncing on his seat, he exclaimed, "Finally, I get to train. It's almost been torture. If I hadn't had you girls, I don't think I would have survived that awful torture. There are plenty of things that we should talk about, but only in private and away from prying ears," she said. She needed to be aware of his fighting style and jutsu. Nagato gave her hints that he was skilled at using shadow clones. Given that his chakra reserves appeared to be remarkably large, she questioned just how skilled he was. As good as Nagato's even. "Naruto?" asked Hinata. To which Naruto immediately focused his attention. He smiled affectionately at her, recalling, "We know about your father but, what about your mom?" He exclaimed, "She was awesome," grinning broadly and joyfully. Konan's heart rate increased sharply as a result of his contagious smile. His current smile was undoubtedly very different from his previous ones, which lacked the joy it now exuded. "Her name was Kushina and that's where I got my clan name from," he said, continuing to smile, but opening his eyes. This name seemed to burn even brighter than usual. She wanted to see this smile more frequently. She suppressed her blush, and Konan believed that he would never be able to do so, all in happiness. The heat rising in Hinata's cheeks made her less controlled. The Hyuga giggled when he said, "I got my good looks from her, you see. She was beautiful. I wish I could show her to you too." Konan's thoughts were interrupted when she said, "Although I think I would look better with red hair." "Red hair?" inquired Konan. Apart from Nagato, she had never encountered anyone else with red hair. "Oh that's right, Uzumaki's apparently had red hair," he responded. The statement, "It was pretty common for them to have it actually," came as he sat back and relaxed. The new information somewhat shocked Konan. Nagato was a member of the clan Uzumaki. They had never discussed many aspects of their previous lives together. Since they were all orphans, they didn't even have last names. Hinata inquired, "Is there something wrong, Konan-chan?" Naruto noticed she was a little upset right away. Desperately, he tried to think of anything that would give him a hint as to why she was acting this way. The thought made him momentarily freeze. He muttered, "Wait. Nagato had." "Yes," was her stoic response. "Then that means he was family." Naruto asked the woman with the blue hair, her amber eyes displaying sadness rather than the stone exterior, and he felt a twinge of sadness creep into him. Did he know? He asked. Despite his own slight melancholy, he wanted to console her because he could see that she was still in pain from the person she had grown up with. After giving this some thought, Konan remembered any sign that he was competent. For the sake of their fictitious peace, Nagato was ready to capture him. She was about to say no when she recalled a specific command from the man in the mask. She remembered that the order had bothered him a little, but he had waved her away when she had confronted him. Did he know? After giving it some thought, Nagato said, "I'm certain. There wasn't much that had disturbed her since." For a few moments, she was met with silence. The upbeat atmosphere that had pervaded the room moments earlier had all but vanished. She regretted ever bringing it up. All she wanted was to see his smile again. While Hinata had a lost expression and a hint of frustration at her incapacity to assist her two friends, he had a serious, thoughtful expression. Konan flinched in surprise as he slammed his hand down on the table with a loud thud. "That only means I'll try even harder. Nagato wanted peace and he believed in me to carry on with that dream." His fiery eyes gleamed with resolve, and Konan always felt that things he said would come to pass, no matter what. The words, "No. This will happen. Him being family only strengthens my desire to achieve what he left for me to complete, and if I have you two by my side, nothing will be able to stop us," were delivered in a firm and honest manner, expressing his unwavering faith in himself. The words, "I'll do it for everyone that believes in me, I'll do it for Yahiko and Nagato," made her breath catch, and she felt both heartbreaking and radiant at the same time. She came to a realization she hadn't bothered to ask herself. Their shared belief in themselves and their blue eyes. The resolute man she had known since childhood, who had bled with her, carried their first dream, and died with him. The person in front of her was the spirit of the man she had fallen in love with. Once again, she became aware of her feelings. The feelings she was experiencing around him, the irregular heartbeat she experienced whenever he smiled. That's when she understood. Naruto Uzumaki was the one she had fallen for. He gazed at the statue and remarked, "I'm guessing that wasn't supposed to happen?" Along the face and down to the body of the large, aged brown statue were several noticeable fractures. He faced the Madara, wearing the mask that swirled in orange. Just before they had completed talking about their future plans, they found themselves in a darkened cave where the statue of Geto was being held. With its hands and arms pointing upward, the statue itself was partially buried in the ground. "It wasn't," he answered. "We hadn't properly sealed the entirety of the 8 tails when we sealed the Kyuubi." Kabuto inquired, "So you did get to Naruto-kun, then?" He took another look at the statue. Tobi, the man, gave a head nod. "So my sources were right then." He was a little disappointed by the information. Naruto served as a major source of inspiration for Kabuto, and in part, he was responsible for his current level of power. "Yes. It was a risk trying to seal the Kyuubi, it had more power than I expected," replied Tobi. The statue itself began to show some cracks a few minutes after they removed the 9 tails. "If I had the whole 8 tails, this wouldn't have come to pass." He felt the slight rise of murderous intent he gave off, but he didn't receive a response to his question. "So you risked the statue then?" Kabuto chose to move on to something else. "So where is his body?" Kabuto inquired. Even though he was disappointed, if he was able to obtain some DNA samples. He thought, he might be one of my best summons. The hero of Konoha fighting on their enemy's side had heard how Nagato, the Rinnegan bearer, had brought the village to its knees and that only one person had been able to stop him. He was excited about the prospect but would also be disappointed to find a body there. "I'll see for myself." He did have a knack for surviving near impossible odds, he thought to himself. "I'll gather the samples I need myself, just tell me where you left the body." He seemed almost excited when he said, "I'll show you the location." Kabuto grinned, realizing that he was getting closer to realizing Orochimaru's dream. "In any case, why in the world are we all out here? I thought there was supposed to be a unified war coming up." Kiba grumbled as the people sat around a campfire in the northeastern region of the Land of Fire. The sky had already started to darken an hour earlier, and everyone was sitting on the ground except for a green-clad Chunin. He looked around him and saw the familiar faces of the people who used to be Naruto's rivals and comrades. Lee, Tenten, Akamaru, and himself. Tenten, who sat across from him and gazed into the flickering flame, responded, "We're supposed to patrol the border in case the other minor villages decide to take advantage of our state. And besides, preparing for a war takes time," she added. 2 days ago, they were assigned to patrol the neighboring countries of Aim and Kusa. He tried to contain his mounting rage by saying, "It's just those Akatsuki have to pay for everything that they had done, that's all. I agree with Kiba-san. They will be held accountable for stealing a comrade from us." Lee, who was performing some one-handed push-ups while the others looked on, declared. "Naruto is." Kiba snarled loudly, "And we don't even know where the hell Hinata is." Akamaru, who was curled up next to him, whimpered as he heard his best friend barking. "Yeah, I know, I guess. All we can do is hope she's alright." The weapon user continued, "We can only hope one of her friends run into her, and not someone else." Danzo's order to list her as a rogue ninja only made matters worse for Konoha shinobi, who didn't take kindly to traitors. "Do you think the rumors were true, Kiba-san?" she asked, and Kiba knew what she was implying without her having to go into further detail. "I hope one of us does," Tenten said, staring at this. "Yeah. I couldn't believe it either. But apparently, it wasn't a rumor. She would never join the Akatsuki, and I don't even understand that." "What do you suppose transpired?" she inquired. "I don't know, but I think she might be a genjutsu, but one's thing for sure, I don't want to lose another comrade, especially not a teammate." "I don't think I would like to know what Sakura feels," she said. She lost 2 of her teammates, and one of them was responsible. Sasuke, that bastard. He is solely to blame. I'm going to murder him, Kiba cut in. Kiba.san. Lee went on, if anyone deserves retribution, it's Kakashi. Sensei. Kiba took a deep, long breath to calm himself, but it didn't help much. The small group fell into an eerie silence, troubled by the recent events and concerned about the impending war. I guess, he said, constantly scanning the area with his nose to make sure they wouldn't be crept upon. I can't believe Sama is still in a coma. At this rate, she'll. Kiba spoke up, saying, stop talking like that. 10.10. Hokage. Sama will make it through, okay? He made a threat, and 10:10 took back her statement before continuing. Yes. You're right, my only concern is how she might handle hearing about, you know. Yes, I heard that Sama and Naruto-kun were quite close, said Lee. 10:10 recalled, he was one of the disciples of Jiraiya Sama, and I heard he helped her become Hokage. Tsunade was an inspiration to her, a highly competent kunoichi that ought to serve as an example for all aspiring kunoichi. Yes. He was. She felt overwhelmed, a flood of emotions crashing down on her, but Konan forced herself to control her panic. She couldn't look into his eyes, and she looked down at the table as he went on, saying, I'll never go back on my word, you know. He concluded, and she experienced a flurry of contradictory feelings, including relief, heartache, joy, rage, and love. The only thing she could have said to him was, I believe you. She felt her throat throb painfully, and she hoped she wouldn't give away that she was upset. Fortunately, a few knocks on the door informed them that the food they had ordered was ready, and a waitress came in with some platters of their food and placed their orders on the table. Ramen. How much I missed you, Naruto yelled out. As he tore his chopsticks, he patiently waited for the others to take up on their meals. His cheery mood had returned, already forgetting about moments prior. Konan was able to calm herself down for now. She didn't dare look into his blue eyes as she looked at her own meal. A plate of flame-broiled fish, one of her preferences to eat. Itadakimasu. Lowly, Konan said hers, and he started eating eagerly. She made herself eat something to appear normal, but the emotions inside her were threatening to come out. She caught a glimpse of Naruto's amazing smile as he finished a mouthful of food, and she noticed Hinata's worried expression as she gazed at her. She ignored her and kept concentrating on herself, not feeling the cheeriness he gave off. Konan was worried about controlling her emotions, hoping that the Hyuga would understand. She ate her dinner quietly, ignoring the blonde's boisterous banter, and thankfully, Hinata didn't say anything or show Naruto that she was under duress. Dinner passed quickly, with some small talk that she didn't participate in. When Naruto brought her into the conversation, she gave her answers without looking at him, and she did her best to conceal her feelings. She might have found this amusing on a different day, but not on the day she realized that she had fallen in love with him, someone who greatly reminded her of Yahiko, and that she felt irrational hatred towards him, something he could not control. She dug into a simple wallet and took out some ryo, enough to pay for the meal and more specifically for him. He looked at her quizzically. The words, enjoy the rest of your night together, caused her some discomfort. Are you certain? I mean, I don't. Yes, she interrupted, forcing herself to look into his eyes, which were piercing cerulean eyes that seemed to be tearing down her defensive walls at the moment. I must plan for the next few days, she said, nearly falling on her own words, but she swallowed the lump in her throat and went on, because we have a lot to do tomorrow and the days ahead, so be sure to enjoy tonight. She gave a little fake smile and got up from her seat. It would be pretty great if you were here, Konan-chan, he said, smiling again, almost making her breathe more quickly and uncomfortably. I'm meant to help you recall, she answered, and he gave a slight nod. Then I have to go, she said, a bit too hastily, and he scowled at the reasoning. If you say so, he said disappointingly, as she turned on her heel to exit out the door. She heard the byes from both the individuals as she closed the door behind her. She entered a hallway that was painted beige. To her right was the stairs leading to the ground floor. She looked to her left and down a large hallway to find a fire escape that led to the outside. She turned to the left and quickened her pace. She made her way down the hall and quickly flung the door open. The loud noise from the nearby festival met her ears. The cool air was a pleasant feeling to her as she tried to take deep breaths but to no avail. Quickly gathering herself, she looked down on the fire escape she was on. She looked to her left to see below numerous people passing through the alleyway. She prepared her dance of the Shikigami jutsu to avoid any unnecessary contact with civilians. Turning herself into paper, she flew through the air to return to the cabin. As quickly as she could, she arrived at the cabin as she set foot on the ground. She deactivated her jutsu and began to breathe heavily, but as she opened the door and stepped inside, she noticed that her vision had begun to blur and that her cheeks were slightly wet. She felt a painful tightness in her throat, and an impossible ocean of pent-up emotions welled up inside her, which only something of the same size could have seized. She was unable to stop it, and she whimpered as she fell to the ground in despair, her legs shakily supporting herself. I don't. She bowed her head and looked at the floor where the hands were shakily supporting herself. How did this happen? She sobbed. She screamed in frustration as more emotions welled up inside her, making her feel like it was a chaotic mess. How could I? It was strange to her that she fell in love with the blonde. She had rarely displayed this much emotion to anyone before meeting him, and she hardly even noticed how he had simply cast down the defensives she put up to protect herself from the pain. She felt angry and hurt that she had fallen for Naruto Uzumaki. She cried at herself. Pity, tears that she hadn't shed in years flew freely from her eyes, and she fell to the ground and looked up at the ceiling while her origami flower perched atop her hair fell from its place. She lay on the floor for an unknown amount of time before slowly getting up, unbuttoning the cloak, and throwing it next to her bed. She covered herself with a blanket and lay down, feeling more tears well up. I don't want to get over you, she said. As she lay next to him, Hinata looked up at the blue-eyed blonde, who was also sleeping in the same bed as her. His piercing gaze had a faint expression of happiness, and she felt something stir inside her knowing that she was partially to blame. I had a really great tea time tonight, she whispered, keeping her voice low so as not to wake Konan from her sleep. They had gone on their date, which lasted only about 2 hours before they decided to call it a night, and she cherished every second of it, even if it was simple. Me too. He smiled contentedly, and she felt a little bolder and quickly took control of it. She quickly crossed the small space between their lips and grabbed him, tasting ramen as she felt his lips on hers. The kiss ended too quickly for her, and she retracted, her heart racing and almost out of breath. She looked shyly away from his next heart-stopping smile, and he chuckled lowly, "You're changing." He leaned in closer and whispered, "I like it." It sent a pleasant chill down her spine. She replied, Me too," biting back her disappointment at stuttering, feeling a familiar sensation that she had experienced the last few times they made out. After gathering her thoughts, she reached up to him again, interlocking their lips in another passionate embrace. She felt the need to be touched by him, and she was able to satisfy it by reaching into his hair with her left arm. Her free hand trailed up the blonde's chest, causing him to squirm from the strange touch, and she experienced butterflies in her stomach. She could never have imagined being this intimate with him in her lifetime. She retreated, feeling a large rush of heat on her face, and she resisted her growing desires. Yes. Okay. She nearly gave in when she heard the disappointment in his voice. Good night. Naruto-kun. Are you prepared? When Hinata sat down away from the clearing where Naruto had seen her train multiple times, she rested her chin on her knees and glanced at Naruto. I won't use any dangerous jutsu, Konan asked. Yes. He accepted. Naruto assumed his taijutsu stance and confronted Konan, his chosen opponent. She pondered whether he had listened to their brief training sessions, as it might have given him some idea of her fighting style, which was primarily mid-range. The blue-haired woman said, "Let's try taijutsu first. We're here to assess you," he nodded. "We must see if you're still capable without the kyubi." Hinata was a little anxious, especially after what she had witnessed and the events of yesterday at the restaurant. She had wanted to try and help her, but she was distracted by the blonde. It was selfish of her, but she could tell that Konan had wanted to be alone. Okay, Naruto said, and she lurched forward as soon as he did. He was taken aback by the sudden speed with which she crossed the distance between them, but she appeared to have paper covering her face and clothes. She opened up with a roundhouse kick aimed at his face, which he quickly blocked with his right arm because he thought it might have been a much lighter blow than the one he had received from a steel bar. I guess that's how her shurikens work, he thought quickly, and he grabbed her leg to throw her, but it slipped out of his grasp as she turned it into paper. He jumped over a sweeping kick and returned it with a low kick of his own, and she leapt away. He quickly gained momentum and put her into a defensive state as they exchanged blows. She was obviously dependent on her paper ninjutsu, but the focus was solely on taijutsu, and both were holding back. Naruto grunted as he blocked a low kick with his right shin. Based on his observations of her training with Hinata, she was more of a ranged fighter than a close combatant, and he blocked a barrage of punches aimed at his face and chest. However, her attacks did hurt due to her chakra-hardened paper ninjutsu. She was quick and flexible and frequently delivered powerful kicks, so he retaliated with grabs to help soften the blow. They continued in this manner for about 30 minutes, resetting themselves whenever Naruto delivered a solid blow or when Konan did. At the start of another round she seemed to have changed the tactics as she retreated several feet into the air. He watched as she basically turned into paper and hovered several feet off the ground. Wings sprouted from her back like an angel's wings. He was slightly intimidated by her appearance. He hadn't seen her take this form before. "Let's see what you're capable of, Naruto-kun." She sent hundreds of paper shuriken at him. With nothing to hide behind, he had no choice but to jump in the air to avoid it. She took advantage of this as he had no chance to move in mid-air. She created a spear and threw it at him. He quickly made a familiar cross and a clone popped up beside him and threw him aside. The spear harmlessly passed through the air. He made 2 other shadow clones and launched one directly at her. "Gotcha," as he grabbed the blue-haired, which was met with disappointment when she escaped from his grasp. "Right, she's made of paper." He quickly thought of a solution while he evaded more blunt paper shuriken. He didn't want to potentially hurt her with a Rasengan. "How can I make her stick together?" He created a substitution to avoid some spears which broke on impact when it struck the ground. "Water? No, wait, oil, I think." "You got it." A medium-sized green toad emerged from the smoke as Konan appeared in view. "Spray her with some toad oil, but don't hurt her," he ordered, putting some distance between the clone and Naruto. He made some hand gestures and nicked his thumb. He quickly thought of a suitable summon, any toad as large as a human. Summoning jutsu. He shouted out and fled with Konan in hot pursuit, running farther into the forest and past a large boulder out of her line of sight. "You got it, boss." For a brief moment, his throat widened, and it hurled some toad oil in the direction of the bronze-eyed woman. She ducked to the right to avoid the sudden jet stream of oil, moved closer to the clone that had emerged from its hiding place, and leapt straight at her, startled by the unexpected appearance, as the clone managed to grab her by the waist and hold her in place long enough for the toad to saturate her with the sticky liquid, causing her to fall to the ground while the clone clung to her. Gazing into her eyes, he grinned and said, "I win," playfully, he said. She said, "It seems so." She was impressed that he hadn't even switched to Sage mode, that he had quickly discovered a weakness in her jutsu, and that he had exploited it without giving her any time to respond. "Just like Jiraiya. Sensei," she said, thinking about how different it might have been if both were going for a kill. She would have definitely used her jutsu arsenal, restraining him or the paper chakram. He thinks quick on his feet. She frowned at the thought. "What's wrong?" She observed how it felt to be held by him and chose to ignore it for the time being as the blue sphere vanished and the clone limiting her dissipated. "It's just, I'm covered in oil." "Oh," he said, rubbing his neck in embarrassment. "I'm sorry," to his heart. "It's quite all right." When Hinata arrived, she had seen the last moments of the fight with her Byakugan, and she discovered Konan completely covered in oil, with the liquid seeping from her clothes and blue hair. She felt an emotion that was similar to what she had felt in the early hours of yesterday at the restaurant, but it vanished after a short while. "After I return from washing the oil off, we should discuss our repertoire of jutsu." Hinata agreed with the nod. "We'll act better as a team if we know each other's jutsu." "You got it," Naruto said, and Konan turned on her heel and headed to the cabin. Hinata watched as she went, remembering what she had seen in her eyes when Naruto had spoken yesterday. For Naruto-kun, followed for a brief moment by grief and anguish before she sealed them off under careful guarded Isa, the same eyes she had seen on their mission to rescue Naruto. Hinata felt sorry for her, that she had suffered in the past, whatever it may have been. She must have suffered so much, she said, disappearing from view as she went deeper into the forest. She turned to face the blonde who had just bid farewell to a toad, which vanished in a cloud of smoke, and she was at a loss for what she could do for Konan. She wanted to help, but she had not the slightest clue. "I should talk to him about this." Naruto-kun. She walked over to where he was standing and turned to face her after calling out to him. "Hinata-chan, how are you? We need to talk." "Yes, how about?" he asked, and just as she was about to ask, she realized that it was inappropriate to discuss someone else's feelings and distress because Hinata didn't even fully understand how she felt. It was all just her opinion, so she decided against it because, in reality, she didn't even know how Naruto would respond. "Can you train with me? I did want to get stronger," she said, veering away from her initial query. He cheerfully said, "Yeah, of course. Oh wait. What is it? I'll send a shadow clone to train with because I need to figure out something important first. Is that okay?" "Well, all right." They headed back to the field, with the clone accompanying her to the center of the field while Naruto cast a shadow while he sat where she had watched them spar. "Hinata-chan, what do you require?" the clone inquired. She said, "I need help with my rotation," and he gave her a perplexed look. "You can help me, Just by throwing shuriken, she explained, and he turned and ran to where some supplies were lying around. He grabbed a bag full of ninja tools and blunted throwing stars. She took a deep breath, and she hoped that she hadn't fallen for the blonde she loved. The clone pulled out a few tools and got ready to throw it, waiting for her to say, "I'm ready." The original Naruto sat himself down on the sidelines. "Alright Kurama. Let's try your thing." He got himself into the lotus position and closed his eyes. He found himself in his mindscape, his feet and ankles were still submerged in the flooded room. He wondered how it came about this. The water didn't get his clothes wet. He looked around to see the pipes strewn about in the ceiling. It was still dim as ever. The area had a look that was similar to a sewer or some waterworks. He turned around to see where had Kurama been kept. He almost expected him to be there. He looked at the large broken gates that had kept the nine-tailed fox. Once the large bars looked like it could hold against any abuse, now it lay broken. The gates were still technically closed, but there was a large gaping hole in the middle. The bars were torn apart and looked deteriorated by rust, its lock missing. He thought about how the seal would look on his stomach. Was it even there anymore? Or was just a hollow seal? He shook the unimportant thoughts away as he approached the gates. He jumped through the hole of the busted gate and looked around. Wow. Geez. The fox's living space was pretty big, and he had to hope it wasn't infinite. "How in the world am I going to locate your sensory thing, Kurama?" He grumbled. Despite the vastness of the dark place he was in, he heard no echo. He had been told that he had a power dormant in him because he had held it captive. Kurama assured him that it would only take a day or so to find it, saying that if he was a natural sensory type, he might already have it, but he wasn't. The ability belonged to the fox but only to his half of the chakra, and it had manifested itself into Naruto, who said, "Well, I might as well get started." He made some shadows clones to aid in his search, and he felt a strange strain in his head, as if he was thinking too much. Konan gazed at the spotless white ceramic tile that was a familiar sight in the bathroom. She could feel the hot water running through her hair and the faint vanilla scent of the shampoo as she washed soap across her body to neutralize the oil that was still present in her hair, which required 2 doses of shampoo to help wash off. She thought about her little spar with the blonde, and most importantly, how safe she felt just being held by him. She didn't want to acknowledge her feelings for him because doing so would also mean admitting that she had moved on from Yahiko. She wished she had never felt anything for the blonde, but she knew that emotions simply didn't work that way. They were far too complicated. If they were simple, she would have forgotten about Yahiko by now. The thought made her heart a little heavy, so she closed her mind and focused on the events and plans, which really helped her. She turned off the shower by turning the knobs, and after a few minutes, she felt a little more refreshed. She changed into her regular clothes, under the dark red cloak she now wore, and went to her desk to write on a piece of paper. She was happy with it, so she opened the door and gave it enough chakra to fly to Aim, her home country. She had written to the country's temporary leader, who was still in charge, but she had other important things to attend to, like helping the blonde with his quest. She wanted to help him, because it was Yahiko's dream, and it should be realized. She headed for their assigned training area. After her 5-minute flight, she reformed herself just outside the field where the other two were. As she emerged from the forest, she saw Hinata practicing one of her jutsu, the rotation with Naruto, or shadow clone. She made another attempt, which lasted approximately 3 seconds before the chakra dome dissipated. Naruto was sitting in the lotus position and meditating to her left, which was a little odd for someone who liked to move and had complained about it when he was incapacitated. The midnight-haired teen was the first to notice her, and the shadow clone puffed away, alerting the one meditating. "Hey Konan. Chan." She recognized him and nodded as he popped up, then moved to where he was standing. "I think we should talk about our jutsu now," Hinata said as she stepped into their small circle and said, "I'll start." She explained her paper ninjutsu, her knowledge of fuinjutsu, and her mastery of fire manipulation. She had only learned a few jutsu for her fire style, which was more than enough for her to use in battle, so she hadn't used her fire style in years. After she finished explaining, Hinata pursued her, using her Juken techniques and basic academy jutsu. She hadn't mastered her known elemental manipulation, which Konan already knew from helping her train. She had started assisting her in manipulation, but the main focus was on her Byakugan techniques because she was an expert in taijutsu and her Byakugan was crucial for infiltration. "It's my turn. I got the shadow clone jutsu, He then listed his jutsu, which included multiple variations of the Rasengan, 1,000 years of death, which she took to be a joke because he chuckled slightly as he said, "The say. Nope, never mind, that's useless." He had a hint of fear in his eyes, but neither she nor Hinata pushed him. His senjutsu was the last item on his list, and Konan took in the details of her small team, which was almost ideal for an infiltration team thanks to the use of his shadow clones, Hinata's Baikugan, and her paper ninjutsu. "Are you still able to use Sage Mode?" Konan inquired. "Yeah, I should actually." He froze for a few minutes, and his eyes took on an orange hue. He felt his face and examined his hands, saying, "Is there nothing on my face?" he asked. She and Hinata shook their heads and he sighed in relief. "Nice." She asked, "Explain how it works." And he explained the benefits and drawbacks of Sage Mode in great detail. After he was done, she considered his jutsu, its applications, and its popularity. The orange tint around his eyes vanished after he finished. Konan cut in, "There's something you should know." "What is that?" He expressed gratitude while blushing and rubbing his neck in embarrassment. "It can be a problem, since you can create so many effortlessly. I recommend you don't create more than 3 if we ever get into a fight," she said, complimenting him. "I don't think I have ever seen someone with such a mastery with the shadow clone jutsu." She had witnessed him create shadow clones with ease, as most ninja didn't create more than a few to conserve their chakra. "Really? Well, I guess I could do that, no problem," he said. Scowling at this information, he recovered swiftly. "Along with your Rasengan, since there aren't very many who can use it, but it won't be a problem since I don't expect fights to occur while we travel." "Damn that too. If you say so. I guess it makes sense, I mean only me and Kakashi. Sensei know it now," he sighed. "I think I could still do it, I still got Sage Mode after all. If we're lucky at all, we don't even have to fight, but just as a precaution, since you have mastered elemental training, I can secure some wind-style jutsu for you to utilize," she assured him. "Good. Additionally, teach me some fuinjutsu," he answered. "If we have time. I must discover something." He seemed excited. He created the cross for the shadow clone. Konan suddenly found herself looking at hundreds of shadows clones, her vision filled with the blonde with the snug-fitting red sweater. She heard a gasp and looked back to where Naruto stood and found him falling over. He fell to her side and Konan quickly grabbed him before he plummeted. "Damn it, it's not as much as I used to make." As he leaned on her for support. "Not so much?" As she considered the biju that had been taken from him, she asked, could he have made even more before? It should have been impossible for any regular ninja, and she had no doubts now that he had chakra that rivaled Nagato's. She looked around the field, where the clones were supporting themselves on their knees, and she could easily tell there were about 200 scattered around the field. "All right. At least I am aware of my limitations," he inhaled deeply. The clones were already recuperating when Hinata glanced around and gave a mild reprimand, saying, "Why? You shouldn't have made so much Naruto-kun. Since you have them out, you should learn how to form a Rasengan without the aid of a shadow clone." He nodded with agreement. "Yes, it was a little challenging, but I did have some experience traveling with Pervy Sage." But now that he was able to support himself, he returned to his original location and said, "I feel like I could do it." "Is it because the biju is no longer within you?" she inquired. "I believe so. According to Pervy Sage, my chakra was always a little unstable because its chakra was constantly blending with mine, but I feel like I have better control over it now." "So the shadow clone jutsu also used the biju's chakra as well," she commented. "Guess so." There was a brief pause as Konan considered their plan. Assemble a particular jutsu, travel to Uzu, and call his father. The clones all moved toward a nearby tree that wasn't occupied by another clone. "They would have to get started tomorrow or soon," she said, looking at the blonde, who appeared somewhat worn out from the effort of making those shadow clones. "He would have to recover for the rest of today, and we'll begin tomorrow." "You should see if that toad got the jutsu, so we can continue on if he doesn't," Konan said. The little white mohawk toad, named Fukasaku, appeared. "All right, geezer. Sage, give it to me straight," Naruto asked firmly. "Good idea," he said, biting his thumb, and finished the jutsu. Summoning jutsu. A strained silence descended as the toad gazed up at the former Jinchuriki. Fukasaku said glumly, "I'm afraid. I only got bad news, Naruto. Boy." "What is it?" The blonde waited impatiently, and Konan's mind was racing with potential solutions. "We haven't found any of the remains of the Forbidden Scroll," Konan said, and Naruto looked disappointed. "Worse," he said, and everyone around him was taken aback. "There will be a war for the last of free biju," he said, leaving Naruto to stare at the toad with wide eyes. This changes things, Konan thought.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.